What's up, everyone? How are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was banished and forged the legendary Soul Reaper blades? Have you ever wondered about a different side of Naruto's world? Welcome to Ninja Seduction on Patreon. We create mature, thoughtfully written what-if Naruto stories, along with exclusive comics and premium quality audio. Our community is interactive. Members can vote in polls, share ideas, and help guide future stories. If you enjoy creative storytelling and a more grown-up ninja experience, we'd be happy to have you join us on Patreon. The link is provided in the description. If you enjoy, then please like, share, and do comments. Naruto Aozaki was enigma to the history of the elemental continent. To both modern and contemporary historians, his actions were incomprehensible. He threw himself into the most dangerous of confrontations, saving the lives of thousands of people without discrimination or reason. He never fought for personal gain, desiring neither fame, glory, or even honor. It was as though he was a sword forged for the sole purpose of protecting others. A sword that would fight, and fight, until it could fight no more. A sword destined to be broken. Even at the tender age of 6 years old, when life is just at its beginning, Naruto Namikaze had been forced to mature faster than anyone else his age. Why? 7 years ago, on the night of his and his twin sister Hitomi's birth, a man wearing an orange and black spiral mask attacked the Namikaze compound. After their mother, Kushina Namikaze, had given birth to them, the man had kidnapped her, and using some sort of ninjutsu, he forcefully extracted the Kyuubi no Yoko from her. Then, using the power of the Sharingan, he controlled the beast and used it to attack his home of Konohagakure no Sato. That night the fox caused nothing but death and destruction. However, his father, the Yondaime Hokage Minato Namikaze, used a powerful sealing jutsu. He used the power to separate the Kyuubi's yang chakra from it and sealed it into his newborn daughter Hitomi. As for the yin chakra and the soul, he sealed it into his son. Once all that was over, Minato told the village that someone powerful summoned the Kyuubi to destroy the village. But he had defeated the beast and sealed it into his daughter, who would use the power to protect the village. The people, who loved Minato, trusted his judgment and accepted Hitomi as the savior of their village and treated her like a hero. Naruto's life, however, had been a living hell ever since. He had no friends save a select few individuals, since the villagers hated him for possessing the soul of the Kyuubi, and worst of all, his parents had brushed him aside, as though he was nothing more than garbage. On their 4th birthday, Naruto was forgotten again. That was 2 years ago. Today he would go and ask his parents if he could train with them and Hitomi like they had been doing for months. On October 10th, the day of his 6th birthday, Naruto walked out of his room and went out to see that his parents were getting the gear ready for Hitomi's training. He went to ask if he could train with them today, but when he got close, he heard them only talking about Hitomi and how happy she would be. They mentioned nothing about him. The days seemed to go the same way. They went by every day the same way as they always did. Right now, a 6-year-old Naruto watched his parents teach his younger sister Hitomi their fighting styles with a scroll of jutsu on the side for later. He was hoping that today would be the day that they would finally train him. He hoped for that every day as long as he could remember. That all he ever wanted: their acknowledgement, their approval, their acceptance. Every time Naruto went up and asked his parents, they would just tell him to leave them alone and continue to focus on Hitomi's training, since they believed that she needed it more since she had the Kyuubi sealed into her 6 years ago on the day of her birth. Even his own godparents, Jiraiya and Tsunade, in their eyes he wasn't worth their time. Finally, after being rejected by the last time, Naruto took it upon himself to get stronger. He went to the village's former Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, for training. The kind old man had readily agreed. Unlike the villagers who had seen Naruto as a demon, and unlike his family who had seen him only as a burden, Sarutobi had been the only one to see Naruto as what he truly was: a child in need. Over the next 2 years, Naruto improved at a rate that left the Sandaime flabbergasted. His taijutsu was obviously strong but underdeveloped, though that was only a matter of finding a suitable style to complement his abilities. In terms of his ninjutsu, however, Sarutobi was positive there had never been a greater genius in the history of Konohagakure. He had mastered Kage Bushin within a matter of minutes, and from there, it was only a matter of creating clones to accelerate his growth even further. A few months after Sarutobi began training him, Naruto met Uchiha Itachi, who had found him during one of his training exercises and watched in silence. He was impressed by Naruto's determination and hard work, and eventually began talking to Naruto. This eventually led to Naruto's introduction to the Uchiha clan. It was then that Naruto met the Itachi's younger sister, Satsuki. The two had quickly struck up a rivalry with one another, always competing to see who could outdo the other in both training and sparring. They had even bet on who could utilize their elemental affinities first. Naruto had lost only by a few days when he mastered his first wind jutsu, Futen, Daitapa, while Satsuki had mastered her first fire, Katen, Gakokyu no Jutsu. The two had promised each other that day that they would one day fight in the future to see who was truly stronger than the other. Mikoto, the mother of both Satsuki and Itachi, thought it was kind of cute and came to enjoy Naruto's presence within the compound. Naruto's presence within the Uchiha compound brought a new dynamic to the once reclusive clan. While many of the other Uchihas disapproved of Satsuki's attachment to the demon container, her relationship with someone who was considered to be a pariah of the village set a precedent that began a trend for many members of the clan to befriend and associate with outside members of the village. Time passed, and many of the more liberal members of the clan began sympathizing with the young boy. They realized that, much like Naruto, the Uchihas were also often treated as outsiders based on events neither of them could control. While a few more conservative elders like Fugaku objected to his presence within the Uchiha walls, their protests were often pushed down by members like Mikoto, Satsuki, and Itachi. Under both Itachi and Hiruzen, and now having found a rival within Satsuki, Naruto's growth improved by leaps and bounds. It was only natural then, however, that Naruto's desire to improve, to search for more jutsu to learn, led him to sneak into the Namikaze library to research his father's Rasengan, a jutsu that he felt was his birthright, and he was caught red-handed by his parents. The result was a thunderous backhand across his face that sent him flying into the adjacent wall. "You stupid little bastard, what the hell are you thinking pulling such a stunt?" Minato yelled. "You worthless piece of scum, how dare you take something without permission?" This time it was Kushina who said this. "We give you everything that you need, a roof to sleep under, the clothes on your back, and we feed you, and this is how you repay us. We told you that you would start your training when the academy begins, but no, you go and steal from us just to try and get us to train you. We're training your sister so she can harness the power of the Kyuubi, so it won't be a threat to her when she's older, but you, on the other hand, don't need the training. Now go to your room and stay there." Tears had begun to fall from his eyes. He had never been screamed at like that. His parents hated him, there was nothing more to it. "You heard your mother, get up and go to your room, and you're not getting any dinner," Minato said harshly. "Gio." Naruto scrambled to get up and run, but not before screaming at his family. "I hate you all." With that, Naruto ran into the house and headed straight for his room. His family stood stunned at the last thing they were told. They felt a slight pang of pain in their chest for some reason. Later that night, after dinner had ended, Minato and Kushina were in their bedroom thinking about what had transpired earlier that day. "You know, I think that we overreacted with the way we treated Naruto," Kushina said as she put on her nightgown. "Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have hit him, but I was terrified when I saw him trying to learn such a dangerous jutsu by himself like that," Minato said as he laid on the bed. "He could have gotten himself killed for all we know." "Maybe, but I think it's our fault too. I mean, he's been asking us to train him along with Hitomi for years now, yet we ignored him," Kushina said, joining her husband on the bed. "Maybe we should help him a little. I mean, let's at least teach him the basic and some low-level ninjutsu and some taijutsu." "I guess we should. I'll have a shadow clone start teaching him tomorrow," Minato said as he turned to look at the red-hair woman. "Hopefully he will forgive us, no? I'm sure he'll forgive us if I properly teach him my Rasengan." "Yes, I'm sure he will, honey. Now let's go to sleep," his wife said as she closed her eyes. Naruto sat on his bed, tears streaming down his face. He still couldn't believe what his father had done to him. Sure, he went and took a scroll to learn from, however, that was no reason to hit him that hard. All this came to hit with a simple answer. All his parents cared for was Hitomi. Yeah, that was right, they hated him because of that Kyuubi brat Hitomi. This wasn't his family, no. These people hated him. Standing up from his bed, he took the decision to leave this godforsaken place and began sealing his belongings into a simple scroll. It did not take long since he had never owned much to begin with. After all, his parents had never bought anything for him. Within minutes, Naruto was already running down the path, already a pretty good distance away from Konoha. I really need to thank Atachine and Saruto by Jiji for all that training one day. Naruto thought. Tears were still streaming down his face, blurring his vision, and before he knew it, he had slammed into someone on the road, sending them both tumbling into the ground. Ow, what the hell? Naruto yelled angrily at the man he had run into. That's my line, brat. The interloper yelled back. Who in blazes are you running around like that in the middle of the night? Isn't it manners to give your own name before demanding the names of others? Naruto growled. Who am I? The man asked, as though Naruto had just said the stupidest thing in the world. He struck a pose, left hand on his hip and the right pointing towards the sky. I am Wizard Marshal Kisher Zelrech Schweinorg, master of the kaleidoscope and adventurer extraordinaire. Silence followed the man's exclamation, save for a few crickets still humming in the night. Naruto looked at the man as though he was crazy, which he indeed thought he was. He decided to give voice that particular thought. You're insane. Naruto yelled, pointing at the man accusingly. There's no such thing as magic. Do not take me for a conjurer of cheap tricks. Zelrech yelled, shamelessly quoting a popular fantasy franchise. I am the sorcerer of second magic and complete master of the infinite multiverse. Well, why don't you prove it to me, Mr. Magician? Rudo deadpanned, baring his teeth. I would. Zelrech declared, still glaring. But I'm having trouble finding an alternate life in the multiverse that's shittier than your current one. It really sucks to be you. He admitted reluctantly. Naruto merely snorted. This was bad, Zelrech realized. He was beginning to lose face here. Quickly he ran through the kaleidoscope until he came to a complete stop at one in particular. Nuwu, he thought. This kid is his alternate. That's just beautiful. Shiru Emiya, or more specifically Counter Guardian Emiya, a man that had fought and killed his entire life for a single ideal, always pushing forward to help others without asking for anything in return. Not once did he ever falter forging his path to become a hero, helping and saving everyone that was within his sight, not once truly valuing himself. To think that he would find an alternate of that man's soul in a completely different world, that could only mean one thing: fun things were bound to happen. Before Naruto could figure out what was going on, the man simply pointed at him, and the world around him turned red as, all of a sudden, pain erupted within his entire nervous system. He felt as though molten lead was being pouted through his veins and arteries. Clutching his head, he passed out before the man's feet. Zelrech scratched his chin as he reviewed the fruits of his work. Synchronicity, the phenomenon that occurs when two beings, two souls come into close contact, allowing the mind and memories to mix. Using his control over the kaleidoscope, Zelrech had forced that same phenomenon onto this boy's soul, and when it came down to it, the very epitome of Emiya's soul was his reality marble, unlimited blade works. Yet the reality marble that was manifesting itself within this young lad now was somehow different. Theoretically, Zelrech knew it should have been impossible for Naruto to completely manifest unlimited blade works within this world. Here, the rule of the world was completely different to Gaia's domain of his own world. Instead of magic that relied on the use of mysteries and prana, this world utilized jutsu that relied on an entirely different unit of energy called chakra. Instead of circuits, they had something called tenketsu points. As a result, the reality marble was beginning to change, adapting itself so that it could be manifested and utilized within an entirely different environment and a different set of rules of nature. Interesting. Time passed, until minutes became hours, and Zelrech soon lost his former interest as he began wondering if the boy would ever wake up. Personally, for a man that had traveled through multiple dimensions, fought the almighty Crimson Moon himself in space and pushed back the moon from colliding into the Earth, something like a stray reality marble or two really wasn't that interesting if had to wait more than 1 or 2 minutes to see its results. I think I may have just murdered a young child. The sorcerer mused as he scratched his chin. Oh, crap, adventuring sorcerer away. And thus he made his escape, opening a rift in another universe where he hopefully did not commit homicide and jumping through it. That night Naruto dreamed of a huge fire. He dreamt that he was in a town filled with screams of pain and agony. He walked through all of them with glassy eyes. Heaps of corpses surrounded him, bodies that screamed for help yet were denied of it. But he knew couldn't help. He knew he couldn't stop. He felt so damned helpless, miserable with despair. His body was covered with burns, his head is leaking blood, but he kept on walking because once he fell down, he knew he could never get up. And so he kept on walking, and finally his limbs were too tired, too damaged to physically walk anymore, so he falls. He looked up on the sky, a sky that is filled with smoke and filled with screams. Soon the screams become silent and he knows he will join them. He accepts this with calm resignation. He is going to die. And then he saw the face of a man smiling. Tears of joy spilled down the side of the man's face. Naruto saw the smile and was filled with jealousy. What made them so different? How could he smile like that even though they were in the same fire, the same hell? At that moment he desperately wished he could have been as happy as that man. Naruto suddenly bolted upright, waking up from the horrible dream. His body was completely drenched with sweat and his heart was beating as though he had just run a marathon. He woke and realized that it was already morning. A sense of dread filled him as he began wondering if he had been caught and brought back to Konoha. He analyzed his surroundings. At first glance, he could obviously tell he was inside a motel room. Suddenly, the door to the room opened and a figure strode through and walked her way to the bed, where he is presently sitting upright. The figure walked in closer until Naruto could get a good look at her face. The figure was a beautiful young woman, perhaps in her mid-30s. She had short silver hair that came down to the base of her neck. Everything about her, from her stance, posture, and aura, just screamed Kunoichi, and a powerful one at that. "Oh, you're awake." The woman knelt by the bed and placed a soft hand over Naruto's head. "It looks like your fever's gone down now. That's good." She gave him a gentle smile and placed a bowl of stir-fry in front of him. "I couldn't make anything fancy without the proper ingredients, but it should be enough to fill you up if you're hungry." Naruto took the spoon to his mouth and ate for what seemed like the first time since the past week. "Good," he whispered without intending to. "I'm glad you liked it." The woman was virtually beaming as she sat down by the edge of the bed. "What's your name, kid?" she asked once Naruto stopped eating and placed his bowl aside. Naruto paused for a moment. "No, just Naruto, no family name." "Naruto, that's a good name," the woman complimented. "My name is Aozaki Mana." A deafening silence filled the room and neither of the two talked for a few moments. Finally, after a few minutes, Naruto worked up the courage to ask, "Why did you help me?" The newly identified Mana shrugged. "Because you looked like someone who needed it," she answered simply. Mana was a nice person, Naruto decided. He felt that it would be all right to trust her. But at the same time, he could not be a burden to her. A kind person like her didn't deserve to be burdened by his presence. "I should go," he whispered, slowly getting up from the bed he had slept in. Mana frowned. "Do you have somewhere you need to go?" Naruto, unsure on what to say, shook his head. "No, but I don't want to be a burden to you," he whispered quietly. Upon hearing this, Mana's facial expression softened a little. "You're not a burden," she told him simply. She paused for a moment as she paused and ruffled his hair for a bit, as though she was trying to find the right words to say. "When I found you in the middle of the road like that, I panicked. I was scared because I thought you were dead and no child should ever die so early in their lives. I also realized what you must have been through for you to end up where you were. When I found your pulse, I felt relieved. No, that's not right. I was happy you were alive." Naruto stared at the woman with wide eyes of disbelief as old memories began surfacing within his mind. "You'd just be a burden to your sister. You worthless piece of scum. Die, demon." Those were the words he had been told all his lifetime and time again, and over time he had come to believe them. But now, here was this woman, someone who barely even knew him, telling him something completely different. "You're not a burden. I was happy that you were alive." A few concise words, but in the end they meant more to Naruto than the entire world. Tears began welling in his eyes and slowly made their way down his cheeks as he began to cry and sob on her chest. Mana leaned down over Naruto and gave him a reassuring smile. "I won't ask or force you to tell me about who you were or where you're from, but if you have nowhere else to go, you can stay with me for as long as you'd like." The crying lasted throughout the better part of the morning. That night, Naruto fell asleep with Mana as they shared the same bed. Naruto's small form was virtually wrapped around Mana like an octopus, as though he was afraid to let her go. He had a small smile of bliss on his face as he fell asleep. His last thought before falling into the blissful unconscious was, "Warm. Hell and heaven, first blade." Minato sat behind his desk trying to do his paperwork. The key word here was trying, as he just placed his pen back down. Sighing in frustration, he sat back into his chair and rubbed his temples. Things for him and his family and the village had gone really badly in the last 5 years. The day after Naruto had been caught trying to learn his Rasengan, Minato and Kushina had gone to his room in order to reconcile and offer him training only to find it completely empty. Assuming he had simply woken up and left before them, The family had continued on their day like normal, believing they could wait until he returned home that day. However, Naruto never came home that day. The day after, the Sandaime had stormed into his office in rage. Minato had been doing his paperwork in his office like he does every day. He was cursing himself for getting the mantle of the Hokage. If he wasn't the Hokage, then he would be with his family right now, but Minato's thoughts were interrupted when he heard someone knocking on the door. "Come in," said Minato before looking to see who it was. He saw Hiruzen Sarutobi coming into his office. Minato was little surprised when he saw his predecessor's face not showing any emotions. Minato knew that Hiruzen was angry. He could see it in his eyes. "What do I owe the pleasure of your visit, Sarutobi-sama?" The fourth Hokage asked. "I want you to explain this," the previous Hokage said, putting down a piece of paper on his desk, while in the meantime his emotionless facade almost showed anger. Minato took the piece of paper and started reading it. He read it once, then twice, before he slammed his hands on the desk in anger. "Is this some kind of a joke, Sarutobi-sama? I would never sign anything like that," Minato shouted. "Oh, is that it? Then how do you explain your signature and the Hokage stamp on it?" the professor shouted while his emotionless facade was breaking up in anger. I don't know," Minato said in a stuttering tone. Somehow Naruto had filled out an emancipation form with both Minato's signature and stamp on it, making it clear that Naruto had run away from home. Minato had immediately sent Anbu teams to go find Naruto around the village in hopes of finding him. When they returned empty-handed, his hope turned into dread and self-anger. After that, he sent letters to all of the Leaf's allies asking for help in searching for Naruto and sent Jiraiya out in hopes of finding him. Minato sighed and rubbed his eyes tiredly. Ever since Naruto left Konohagakure, his life had taken a completely downhill turn. When they had learned of Naruto's disappearance, Kushina and Hitomi had broken down in tears. Initially, Kushina had demanded that she be let out of Konoha to look for Naruto. Minato had argued against it, stating that it wouldn't make a difference since he had already sent out several ANBU teams, and they had no idea where Naruto was to begin with. Kushina had sent him into a wall with a chakra-powered punch when he said that. The following day, Kushina had virtually ransacked the house looking for something, anything that may have evidenced the fact that Naruto had once lived there, only to find nothing. There were no photos of Naruto. Besides a few early baby photos, every family photo included only Hitomi, Minato, and herself, along with Jiraiya and Tsunade on occasion. Kushina had tried looking for his belongings next, but the search had turned out just as fruitless as the first. Neither she nor anyone else to her knowledge had ever given him anything, not even for his birthdays. Sadly, Kushina remembered how she screamed at Naruto the day before he had left, about how they had provided everything for him and given him everything. The irony was that in reality they had given him virtually nothing. Not an ounce of love, not a second of attention, or a single gift. Hell, she couldn't even remember if he had eaten with them during meal times. Fully realizing the impact of what she had done, Kushina spent most of her time in Naruto's room, crying to herself in his bed, unable to forgive herself for the atrocity she had committed. If that wasn't bad enough, however, the final culmination of the Namikaze's misfortune occurred last year when he had tried to teach Hitomi the Rasengan. After Naruto's departure, Hitomi had fallen into a state of depression. She never hated her brother. On the contrary, she loved him very much, to the point it teetered between sibling love and incestuous relations. She had always known full well how her parents' discrimination against her brother left him alone and in pain. However, the rigorous training regimen her father had put her through often left her little time to try and reach out to her brother. Yet during the few times she had paid attention to him, she found him to be a kind and gentle person despite all the painful experiences he had endured. Since the day of Naruto's departure, Minato had put Hitomi through an even more rigorous training program in hopes of stopping her from falling into depression. Unfortunately, it had never really worked, and instead seemed to backfire as she grew even more depressed. She had advanced through the first stage of the Rasengan, which emphasized chakra rotation, within a week. When she began learning the second stage of his jutsu, however, things had gone wrong. She had enormous trouble focusing denser chakra within her hand. As she began her third try, however, a pulse of demonic chakra had begun leaking out of the seal. Hitomi had screamed in agony as seal began burn through her skin. Before Minato could even try to repair the seal, red chakra that had leaked out of her seal rapidly grew to a cascade and began taking shape into the chakra form of the Kyuubi no Yoko. The beast let out one final roar before it vanished in a red flash. When the dust settled, everyone had gathered around the demolished Namikaze estate. Thankfully, no body had been killed or seriously hurt by the giant explosion of chakra. Hitomi, however, suffered terribly from the explosion. She had lied still unconscious inside a crater, smoke still steaming off of her seal which had burned itself into her skin, never to go away. She had been a ghostly shade of white, having lost gallons of blood, and not only that, but she was no longer the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi's chakra. Minato sighed. In the aftermath of the Kyubei's release, Hitomi's chakra coils had been severely damaged. Along with losing the Kyuubi's chakra, she no longer possessed her vast reserves of chakra, a trait shared by all Uzumakis. For all practically purposes, Hitomi now possessed similar reserves to that of a ninja coming from a civilian family. It was as though the heavens themselves had been punishing the Namikazes for what they had done to Naruto. Minato sighed, shaking his head to get the depressing thoughts out of his head. He had a meeting with the Kazekage later today, and he needed to make sure he wasn't completely depressed for it. A Hokage's work never waits after all. The meeting with the Kazekage itself went by very quickly. In the end, it was only a simple revision of their former treaty based around limiting Konoha's economic activities within Kase no Kuni. After the Kazekage signed his name onto the now renewed treaty, rather than making a move to leave, he waited patiently in his chair waiting to gain Minato's attention. "Before I go," Sabaku no Kanbei stated as he leaned back into the chair and stared at Minato. "Your son was spotted near the borders of Sunagakure a little over 1 month ago." Minato's eyes widened momentarily, but for the most part was able to hide his surprise. "I see," Minato said, carefully waiting for the Kazekage to go on. "It seems he had something of a scuffle with my son during one of their patrol missions." "Which son did he fight?" Minato asked, fearing the worst. Gaara Sabaku, the Jinchuriki for the Ikibai, was one of the worst-kept secret weapons of the elemental nations. He was notorious for his psychotic rampages and insane lust for blood. "My youngest son, Gaara," the Kazekage informed, confirming his fears. "Though," he added with a touch of amusement, "calling it a scuffle may be an understatement considering he had to battle Gaara's fully transformed state." "What, this time he wasn't able to hide his shock at all? What happened?" "Is he all right? Where is he now?" It wasn't until he noticed the small smile on the Kazekege's lips did he realize he had just completely lost his composure in front of a visiting cage. Cursing to himself mentally, he forced himself to calm down and waited for the Kazekage to begin speaking once more. Still sporting a slight grin, Sabaku resumed once more, answering each question in turn. "Your son defeated Gaara and made his escape before the first squad arrived at the scene. I would assume that he was all right considering he was able to avoid being caught by all of the retrieval squads I had sent out after him. As for where he is now, I would not know." Minato nodded. It wasn't much, but at least he now knew Naruto was still alive. With some luck and Jiraiya's spy network, they should be able to pick up his trail, find him, and hopefully convince him to come back home to Konoha. "Thank you, Kazekage-sama. I will not forget this." Sabaku shrugged, brushing off the gesture. "Do not thank me, Hokage-sama. Rather, I should be the one thanking Naruto. After his fight with Naruto, Gaara has changed and become much calmer since then. I look forward to meeting him when the time comes." For the first time in years, Minato Namikaze was actually looking forward to going home. He was anxious to tell Kushina the news and contact Jiraiya so that they could get on Naruto's trail as soon as possible. When he arrived home, however, back to the newly rebuilt Namikaze estate, he was surprised to find both Jiraiya and Tsunade already there. He invited the two to dinner, and once they sat down at the table, he told Kushina what he had learned from the Kazekage earlier that day. Jiraiya grinned. "I'm already one step ahead of you, Minato. Do you know the bridge that was completed 2 weeks ago in Nami no Kuni Wave Country? They're calling it the Great Aozaki Naruto Bridge. I think it might have been named after him. Naruto isn't exactly a common name after all." "He changed his name?" Kushina asked, hurt evident within her eyes. "I suppose I shouldn't be so surprised, should I?" she said sadly. "It's not like we were ever real parents to him." Minato went over to Kushina and placed a hand on her shoulder, making her look at him, and said to her, "Kushina, I said that I wouldn't give up on Naruto until I brought him back, and I intend to do just that. We will make things right again, I promise." Kushina looked up and smiled, hopeful that they would make it up to Naruto, and that return everything was finally going to start getting better again after this whole ordeal is over. "Do you know what happened?" she asked, her curiosity leading her to wonder exactly what Naruto had done to get a bridge named after him. Well, have you heard of the shipping magnate known as Gato? Georgia asked, making those around him collectively nod. Well, it turns out that he was also an extremely powerful crime lord. Slavery, drug running, smuggling, you name it. Any form of illegal shipping and movement can be traced back to him and his company. What does this have to do with Nami no Kuni? About a year ago, Jirya explained, this little bastard started an entire monopoly on the imports and exports of Nami no Kuni. After that, he began starving the entire island to bring it under his control. He pretty much crushed anyone that tried to resist him. Hell, he even publicly executed a few guys just to show the people what happens to anyone that tries to mess with him. Sounds like a bright little ray of sunshine. Tsunade commented dryly. Jirya nodded. There was one way to break Gato's monopoly, though. A man named Tazuna began building a bridge to connect the small island with the mainland. It was their only hope for the people of Nami no Kuni to start up trade again and break Gato's stranglehold on their nation. I know that name. Minato spoke up suddenly, his eyes lighting up in recognition. He came to the Konoha a few weeks ago and hired a small genin team for a C-rank mission. What happened? Kushina asked. It turned out Tazuna had lied about the difficulty of the mission. Minato recounted somberly. They were ambushed by the Oni Kyodai demon brothers, and a genin got killed in the process. After that, the Jonin sensei found out what was going on and realized they would be facing the Kirigakure no Kijin, demon of the mist. They aborted the mission and came back to Konoha. I assumed Tazuna was killed after that. Well, Jirya intervened, continuing the story from there. It turns out Naruto came across him while the man was trying to sneak his way back into Nami no Kuni. After hearing him out, Naruto agreed to escort him back home and protect him until the bridge was completed. After that, the accounts become a little dubious, but if my informants in that area are to be believed, he fought Zabuza Mamachi and his accomplice twice and won. Then after that he killed Gato along with his entire mercenary army, just to wrap it up. As Jirya finished his narrative, the people around him were gaping like fish. He fought an A-ranked Nuke Nin and won. Kushina asked in shock. Even Minato, who already had some idea of Naruto's combat prowess from the Kazekage account of his fight with Gaara, was still surprised that his son could already beat such a notorious ninja. Jirya nodded in confirmation. Apparently he beat Zabuza and his apprentice, but decided to spare them both. After that, he followed the two to Mizu no Kuni, land of water. Mizu no Kuni, as in Kirigakure, village of the mist, Minato shouted. Aren't they in the middle of a civil war right now? I honestly doubt he went there just to sightsee. Jirya noted. And judging by the company he's following, I'd bet my entire Ika Ika series he's probably going to join the rebel side. Zabuza Mamachi is a pretty infamous enemy of Yagura after all. Kushina was conflicted. On one hand, she felt a touch of pride that her son had done something noble like liberating a nation. But a part of her was also sad when she realized that her son had gone through already, killing and risking his life at such a young age. Naruto was no longer an innocent child she could coddle the way she should have, and it hurt her to know that she had completely missed his childhood. Shaking the depressing thoughts out of her head, Kushina stood up from where she was sitting and slammed her hands down on the coffee table in front of her. Well, what are we waiting for? She demanded, let's bring Naru-chan back. Minato shook his head. It's a little more complicated than that, Kushina. Kiri is in the middle of a civil war right now. If we send a squad inside their territory, it might very well spark a war between Konoha and Kiri. Kushina swung around to face Minato directly. Minato Namikaze, are you saying we should just sit here and do nothing while our son is stuck in the middle of a bloody civil war? She yelled angrily, glaring at Minato with a look that promised much pain if he didn't answer with great caution. Of course not. Minato raised both hands to make a conciliatory gesture, but the fact remains that we still don't know Naruto's specific location right now. Hearing Kushina growl, Minato immediately sped up in a slightly higher-pitched tone. I'm just suggesting we wait until Jirya finds out exactly where he is before going in and getting him out. He finished quickly. I'm going to be on that team, and we're going to be setting out the minute we find out where he is. Kushina informed him in a voice that brooked no argument. Fearing for the existence of his manhood, Minato mutely nodded, thought secretly he worried for the safety of his wife. It had been years, after all, since Kushina had been in the field. Already he began wondering who to assign to this mission to accompany her. Mollified, Kushina sat back down in her seat and sighed sadly, her mind worrying if she would ever see her son again. "Naruto, please be all right." Naruto leaped over the fence into the camp, his silhouette nothing more than a blur against the moonlight. His crimson coat was completely soaked in blood, though none of it was his own. Around him, sounds of battle were raging on as steel clashed against steel and men cried out as fatal blows cut into their flesh. From the darkness, two Kiri nins flanked him from both sides, hoping to ambush him. Naruto jumped, twisting his body in the air and narrowly dodging both swords that had moved to slice him in half. He traced Kanchu in his left hand and Bakuya in his right, and thrust them both into the chests of these attackers, all in the same motion of his dodge. Landing gracefully on his feet, Naruto continued to run forward as though he had never been stopped in the first place. Seeing a group of enemies a short distance away, he jumped high into the air before landing in their midst. Before any of them could react, he traced several swords around himself and launched them simultaneously in all directions, killing many of the ninja in the process. He then finished of the remaining enemy by tracing a new set of the yin and yang swords and systemically killing them one by one. After finishing off the last soldiers, Naruto stopped and took his signature stance, readying himself for more attackers to jump out at him. When none came and the clearing was silent, he reinforced his sight and hearing to better take in his surroundings. For the most part, the defenders were falling back into the small fortress in the middle of the camp. He heard the small pattering sound of running behind him and turned around to see Haku, Zabuza, and Suijutsu leap into the ring of corpses he had been standing in. "Well," Naruto asked them, "it's as bad as we knew it would be." Zabuza told him gruffly, "This is a concentration camp for bloodline clans, a fucking slaughterhouse to kill them off nice, slow, and systematically." Zabuza shook his head. "Shit, Gaki, there are things in here that even I wouldn't do." Coming from a guy that slaughtered his entire academy class to graduate, that said a lot. Naruto nodded, doing his best to ignore that nagging sadness he felt at being unable to have saved many of the people here. No, he knew he could never have been able to save all of them in the first place. The important thing was to save those he still could. "We should hurry before the enemy have chance to regroup. Where are the prisoners being held?" The question was directed at Suijutsu, who pointed towards the west wing of the camp. "My clan and most of the others were kept there. Come on, I'll lead you there." The four quickly ran through the camp, killing anyone who was foolish enough to get in their way. They made their way to a section of the camp that contained several rows of buildings that looked more like warehouses or barns rather than human settlements. Naruto kicked the nearest door open. Slight illumination from the stars along with reinforced eyes gave a clear view of what was inside. Though the building itself was fairly large, it was impossible to tell from the inside. Every inch of space had been used to cramp stalls upon stalls against one another. Yes, stalls, the kind that were used to house animals rather than human beings. While the building itself looked as though it would collapse at any minute, its inhabitants looked far worse. All of them wore a standard gray prison outfit with a long-sleeved shirt and long gray trousers with straw sandals. They also had steel collars around her neck with special seals placed on it so that it would suppress their chakra, effectively stopping them from using ninjutsu. Naruto knew it was also designed to paralyze its victim or explode depending on how the guards chose to activate it, or if anyone less than a seal master carelessly tried tamper with it. However, what struck Naruto the most was their conditions. Their faces were pale from malnutrition and lack of exposure to sunlight. They were skinny. He could see their cheekbones, and their shirts, as threadbare as they may have been, looked far too big on them. It was the view of a people that had been overworked and deliberately starved for years. Suijutsu, is that you?" Jiji, the blue-haired swordsman, blurred past Naruto towards an elderly old man. "I was wondering what the ruckus was outside." The now identified Hazuki laughed. "I never dreamed you of all people would come back here." "It wasn't just me." Suijutsu shook his head and gestured towards where Naruto was standing. "I was also saved." Naruto kept his face impassive, giving nothing away as the old man turned to study him. At long last, the Hazuki head simply shrugged. "I don't care," he stated simply. "I had enough of this godforsaken place. Free us. I'd much rather die facing Yagura than return here." A slight smile touched Naruto's face. "That's a good attitude, old man, but first we need to get those collars off you." He turned Zabuza and Haku. "Raid the supply depots for food and start handing out soldier pills to the prisoners. That way we won't have to worry about them dying from indigestion, and they'll hopefully have enough strength to haul ass out of this dump." Once you've done that, Haku and Suijitsu will organize a retreat back to the hideout. Zabuza, you're coming with me. Meet me in front of the keep in 20 minutes. Zabuza raised a brow. Why, you're not planning to do something stupid again, are you? Naruto whirled around at the swordsman. Zabuza, if I told you I was about to do the stupidest and most reckless thing in the history of stupidity and recklessness, would that deter you from going along with it anyways? You're just saying that to entice me, aren't you? That's what I thought. Quickly, those around him began shuffling out to carry out his commands. As they did, Naruto took a moment to step back and sigh. It had been 5 years since he had run away from Konoha, 5 years since he had met Mana, and 5 years since those dreams began and ended, dreams of the Red Knight from who he had borrowed his jutsus. In the dreams he had watched, Naruto was the Red Knight, watching the man's life and adventures through the knight's eyes as though they were his own. He had watched the man grow up with the ideals he had borrowed from his adopted father, fight tooth and nail to survive Trough the secret war, and dedicate the rest of his life saving and protecting the lives of others, not once giving a damn about his own. In a way, he admired the Red Knight, ignoring loss and gain, never compromising his principles even at the cost of his own humanity. But in the end, he had died, betrayed by the very people he had saved, blamed for the very wars he had ended, and was executed as a villain. His heroic actions destined to be seen as fanatical terrorism by those that could never understand why he was so willing to risk his life for others. Yet the knight had died with a smile on his face. It was a calm, relaxed smile as he accepted his end. Not a single regret rested in his heart. Back then, Naruto couldn't understand how the Red Knight could accept such a terrible end so easily, but more and more he was starting to understand the Red Knight's smile. Unmo Samudera was not having a good day. He had been assigned to be the supervisor of this camp for a short mandatory routine tour. He had not enjoyed doing many of things he had done here, but orders were orders, and in the end it was usually his life over someone else's, since Yagura was not the kind of leader that would tolerate disobedience or failure. As disagreeable as the work may have been, it should also have been safe, easy, and simple. None of those words described the situation he was in now. His battle-honed instincts had woken him up in the dead of night to the metallic smell blood, and he had looked out the window of his room to see his men being slaughtered. It wasn't difficult to deduce who his enemy was. Their Kirigakure headbands and intended targets were a dead giveaway that they were Kiri rebels. If anything, though, Samudera wanted to know why the hell the rebels were active all of a sudden, when they had been virtually non-existent in Kiri for that past 2 years. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw 2 lone figures walking towards the steel-walled keep, as though they were out for a leisurely walk. They stopped well within shuriken or kunai throwing range, not that anyone would have been stupid enough to try to attack men who were obviously messengers in their predicament, but the pair's absolute confidence in their current well-being was downright demoralizing. It wasn't difficult for Samudera to recognize Zabuza Mamachi, the notorious Kirigakure no Kijin, but the person next to him was a complete mystery. He was young. That was the first, though, that struck Samudera. He couldn't have been much older than a rookie genin, and yet he held himself as though he had been born to be on the battlefield. The figure, Samudera couldn't bring himself to call him a boy, had golden blonde locks that came down over frigid blue eyes, that sent chills down anyone who looked too deeply into them. He wore a red overcoat, though Samudera noted bitterly that it could have just been the blood of all guards he had seen the monster kill during the initial attack. "Hello, future victims," the crimson-clad blonde cheerfully called from below. "I thought I should let you know that the prisoners in this camp, including the Hazuki clan and various other clans, have been freed. Right now, they are eating to regain their strength. But you can be sure once they're done they'll hunt you down and kill every last one of you. If you surrender, though, we'll let you go free, and you might be able to escape before they finish their meal. Make your choice quickly, though, because you don't have much time." In the end, it wasn't much of a choice. The camp itself held no strategic value, and the rebels had already completed their main objectives. The loyalists knew that if they died there, their deaths would have been meaningless, and they would have no doubt died painful deaths at the hands of their former captives. Quickly, the Kiri nins made their choice. They surrendered their weapons and began running out of the camp. Watching the backs of the fleeing ninja, Naruto's eyes drifted over the Zabuza. "Don't," he said, making the demon of the mist jerk in surprise. "You noticed? It was not a question." Naruto nodded. "We gave our word that we would spare them, so we will." He paused for a moment before continuing. Besides, we need them to run away. If they had stayed, there's a chance they might have been able to follow us back to our base. It's not like we can move quickly with half-starved prisoners after all. This way, they'll spread word of what we've done here and make people realize how quickly Yagura's authority is falling apart. Zabuza chuckled. Sorry, I guess old habits die hard. This was the job I had back when I still Yagura's dog after all, hee. Naruto turned and looked Zabuza straight in the eyes. You are no one's dog, not anymore. This is our fight, no one else's, so we will fight it the way we choose. Zabuza's eyes widened for a brief moment before staring back at Naruto impassively once more. Having said his fill, Naruto turned around and walked back towards the section of the camp where the prisoners were being freed from their bonds in order to see what he could do to help. For a while, complete silence dominated the camp. From a small, inconspicuous puddle lying on the ground not too far away, the demon brothers, Gazu and Mizu, silently emerged like shadows. Zabuza-sama, should we hunt them down? Mizu asked, curious as to why his leader had not already given the signal to attack. Zabuza seemed to consider the choice for a moment before shaking his head. Nah, he drawled nonchalantly. We'll let them live for today. Come on, let's get back to the others. He turned and began walking in the direction Naruto had gone, his back already receding into the distance. Years later, the prisoners of Camp 11 would reflect upon this moment and realize how absurd the situation must have seemed. To have not even hesitated to follow the orders of a mere boy they had never even met before. Yet that boy carried some kind of aura within him, wielding charisma in such a way that compelled the prisoners to accept his commands without question. As one Hazuki would later comment, I followed the Crimson Knight out of the concentration camp and into battle, not because of any reason or logical thought, but out of instinct. It was as though every fiber of my being was screaming at me to follow this man. I'm not sure why I did, but maybe it's because I somehow knew I was about to witness the birth of a great legend. A small boat moved quietly across the misty water, its light gray hull blending in nearly perfectly with the foggy background. Upon the bow of the small schooner, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze leaned forward on the rails and sighed as she looked into the thick curtain of the impenetrable mist. It had been 2 whole months before Jiraiya had returned to Konoha with more information about Naruto and the current situation in Kiri, and the news wasn't good. It seemed the village of the Bloody Mist had somehow become even bloodier in the recent weeks. All over the map, rebel forces that had laid dormant only weeks before had suddenly taken up the fight once more against Yagura, attacking peripheral ninja outposts and performing nuisance raids against the Mizukage supply lines. The rebel forces themselves were divided up into several separate factions distinguished by numerous different clans and organizations, all with different interests. At the center of these groups was the small group known as the Burebusu, Braves. They were neither the largest of the group of the rebels nor the most dangerous, but they were the most notorious. They were the ones that attacked the most strongly fortified positions, took on the most dangerous tasks, and had the greatest successes compared to the rest. What was most striking about this particular group was that they seemed to be more focused on saving people more than just killing enemies. Sometimes, people needed a symbol of hope, and they had become that symbol. Surprisingly, they were led by Zabuza Mamachi, the Kirigakure no Kijin, and someone they now called the Shinkushi, Crimson Death. Jiraiya's contacts had told him that a boy matching Naruto's description had been spotted amongst this same group. A part of Kushina was excited to see her son again, to have a chance to finally apologize for everything she did and didn't do and mend broken bridges. But the other half of her was scared of what he may have become, of how he may react when he sees her. Behind her, the team Minato had assembled to bring Naruto home rested on different parts of the ship. Kakashi stood leaning against the mast, his signature orange Ika Ika book pulled out and stuffed in front of his face, though the lack of perverted giggles and an occasional fidget told Kushina that he felt far more anxiety than he would have preferred displaying. It made sense that the Yondaime Hawkage would send his last surviving student for this mission. Kakashi was a tracking specialist and a powerful shinobi in his own right. Closer to the stern of the ship, Jiraiya, much like Kushina, was leaning against the rails looking uncharacteristically worried as he waited for the ship to make port. Near him, Uchiha Itachi sat cross-legged with his eyes closed in complete silence. He had stayed in that position the entire voyage so far and showed no signs of moving. The final addition to the 5-man team was resting in his cabin below on the lower decks of the ship. Like Itachi, Sarutobi Hiruzen had also volunteered for the mission once he had heard of it. Both Minato and Kushina were more than a little shocked to see the legendary shinobi no Kami come out of retirement to go find his surrogate grandson. After a few more hours of sailing, the small schooner stopped about a mile away from shores of Kiri. The five ninja jumped off the ship and used water walking to run across the surface of the sea and reach land, so that their movements would be inconspicuous. They stopped outside a medium-sized town. From there, Jirya went off alone to meet the contact that had given him the information. It was a very normal procedure for a mission, but each member of the five-man squad had personal feelings about the mission, and that turned their anxiety into restlessness. About an hour later, Jirya came walking back, a frown on his face. "This isn't good," he told them as soon as he reached their location. "According to my contact, the rebel forces are already on the move. Apparently they're gathering together in order to try to coordinate their efforts against Yagura." Sarutobi frowned. "This does complicate things." He agreed. "If the rebels of Kiri are gathering for an attack against Yagura, then our window for the mission will be far more limited than we thought. With the area far more hostile, both sides will have their forces on full alert, so we will have to be careful." Jirya nodded. "If there is a battle, though, then there's a good chance that we'll find Naruto there. The problem is getting close enough to convince him come home without actually getting caught up in the fight." "What do we do then?" Kushina asked, deferring the decision to the former Hokage, who was by far the most senior member of the group and therefore the squad leader by default. "In order to find Naruto, we will have to get in contact with the rebels." Hiruzen decided. "Jirya, do you know where the rebels are gathering?" Jirya nodded. "They're supposed to meet somewhere near the Sanada Mountains towards the east. We should be able to get there by tomorrow morning if we push the pace." "Then let's go," Kushina stated, already running off in that direction. Night had fallen hours ago, but for the squad of high-level ninja moving at a pace which would have left most Chunin puking from exertion, it was nothing more than a walk in the park. They weaved their way around the trees, occasionally stopping to hide from a stray Kiri patrol now and then. As Kushina ran, a strange yet familiar sensation alerted her senses, and she, along with the rest of the group, slowed to stop. "Did you sense it as well?" Hiruzen asked, quietly. Nodding heads answered his question. Closing her eyes, Kushina extended her senses to take in the little details around her. Screaming. That was the first thing she noticed right of the bat. It was very faint, probably about a few miles or so away from their current position. The second thing she noticed was the smell of burning flesh and fire. "There's something going on up ahead," Jirya confirmed. "From the looks of it, it could be a battle. Should we go check it out?" "Is that wise?" Kakashi asked, "drawing ourselves into a battle?" "If there is a battle, it's likely to be between the rebels and the loyalists," Hiruzen deduced. "Depending on what happens, we might be able to follow them to the location of the gathering." Unanimously agreed, the group moved towards where they had sensed the fire, expecting a battle of some sort. What they found, however, wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. A small village had been set ablaze, its inhabitants currently being rounded up, and being dragged into the Konoha team crept around the edges of the clearing, careful to conceal their presence and hide their chakra signature as they observed the situation. At the head of the Kirin Nins, Jirya spotted Jinpachi Monashi and Kushimaru Kuraiarare of the legendary Seven Swordsmen of the Mist. Though they could not hear exactly what was being said from their vantage point. However, whatever had been said, it didn't seem to be enough to spare the villagers, as the two swordsmen began indiscriminately killing the villagers en masse. Kushimaru used his signature Nuibaru to pierce through several people, and used his wires to tie them together like rag dolls, letting them die slow and painful deaths as they were crushed in the mass of writhing bodies. Jinpachi's Shibuki was just as, if not more, brutal than the other, using his explosive sword to create a swathe of flying body parts and bloody flesh. Both swordsmen carried identical expressions. They were the expressions of someone who were used to unleashing great amounts of agony and pain on their victims, and were absolutely getting off in doing so. Kushina gripped down on her katana until her knuckles turned white. Only the knowledge that killing the two murderers would result in an international war between Kiri and Konoha, thereby botching any possibility of being reunited with her son, stopped her from interfering with the massacre. Fortunately, someone else was willing to do exactly that. Grunting. The word had not been yelled or shouted, and yet it had somehow echoed around the entire clearing. Immediately, a red light flashed across the air so quickly that many who had witnessed it wondered if they had really even seen it in the first place. Jinpachi paused for a moment to blink, and then looked to his chest to see a gaping hole in the middle where his heart should have been. The surprise attack had its intended effects as the rest of the shinobi in the clearing stared at their leader in a mixture shock and disbelief. Before any of them could make a single comment, a rain of swords came flying down upon them. Most of the ninja there had enough common sense to dodge through the air, though a few reacted too slowly and were cut down by the onslaught. As they landed, chaos erupted as members of the Hazuki clan began rising up from the ground from small puddles of water and attacked. Battle raged as rebel forces took on the remaining loyalists. Kashimaru whipped through his enemies using his signature Nuibari to piercing through several rebels, and using ninja wire to crucify them on the nearest given surface. He was forced to duck, however, performing a near-perfect split as a man-sized cubic hirabacho cut through where his torso had once been. "Zabuza," the masked shinobi stated, "It's been some time. I never thought you of all people would run around the mist selflessly saving the lives of others. What happened? Did you finally find a donor to get that heart transplant you've always wanted?" The former member of the Seven Swordsmen smirked under his mask of bandages. "Funny. I'll have you know this wasn't exactly my idea, but unfortunately our leader has something of a hero complex and I'm just going along with it." "Ah, the infamous Shinkashi." Kashimaru chuckled. "It's a shame. I was interested in crossing blades with the man that could apparently get you to follow him. Who knows? Maybe I'll get the pleasure of hunting him down after I kill you." "Why, wait," a voice from behind him asked. Kashimaru's instincts kicked in and he leaped to the side just as Black Falchion nearly cut off his arm from behind. He turned around to face this new opponent. A boy in red wielding a set of falchions, one of darkness and another of light, stood before him. His mop of golden locks were as bright as the sun. His blue eyes were cold glaciers that bore into the figure in front of him. "You can face me right now." Kushina's heart stopped when she saw Naruto for the first time in 5 years. It was the first real look she had bothered to give her son since the day she had first held her twins in her arms 13 years ago. An onrush of emotion flooded her heart, joy, pain, relief, and regret as she watched her Sochi stare down the legendary swordsman of the mist. For the rest of the Konoha group, to say that they were shocked would have been akin to saying that Tsunade was a little bad at gambling. "Naruto's the Shinkashi." Kakashi whispered in disbelief. Jiraiya frowned, knowing this would only complicate things further. You couldn't just take away a key leader in the middle of war and not expect repercussions. Hiruzen and Itachi were the quickest to get over their surprise. The Sandaime now sported a proud smile on his face as he watched Naruto. He had always known that the boy would go on to do great things, but even he never imagined that Naruto could have accomplished something like this so early in his life. "Naruto, you truly are the most unpredictable and surprising person I have ever met." Itachi thought with a slight smile slightly mirroring the former Hokage. Zabuza glared at the new interloper. "What the hell, Gaki? I was fighting him." "Sorry, Zabuza," Naruto answered, silent rage evident in his voice. There were many things in this world that could piss him off, but murdering innocent people for enjoyment was definitely near the top of the list. "But I'd like to be the one to kill him if you don't mind." Zabuza, immediately recognizing the source of Naruto's ire, took a step back and nodded. There were many things Zabuza would have risked his life for, but fighting a former member of the Seven wasn't one of them. "It was nice knowing you, Kashimaru. I hope Kami has mercy on your soul because the Gaki will show your body none." The battle erupted and Kashimaru sprang towards and sent a sharp stab towards Naruto's unguarded vital point. Naruto blocked the sharp needle-like sword with Kanshu and immediately spun around to counter with Bakuya, aiming to slice off the man's sword arm. The masked swordsman twisted his body out of the way, dropped onto the ground, and tried attacking Naruto's knees. Naruto jumped and slammed both feet down onto the sword. The reinforced stomp buried the steel sword into the ground, threatening to break it. In the same movement, Naruto simultaneously brought down both falchions in a pincer movement towards Kashimaru's throat. Kashimaru threw his head back, feeling the swords graze across the edges of his mask, before yanking his sword out of the ground and Black flipping away from the crimson-clad blonde in an attempt to gain some distance. Naruto didn't follow. Instead, he simply returned to his earlier stance, drawing both his arms away from his torso, leaving it completely bare. It was a stance that invited attacks to the fatal openings it left, and as Zabuza best described it, you'd have to be batshit crazy mother-seeker with balls of iron to use that kind of style. The entire exchange lasted only 2 or 3 seconds at most, and now both swordsmen drew back from one another, analyzing their opponents and planning out their next moves. A breeze passed through the clearing, rustling Naruto's coat. "Impressive," Kashimaru commented. "Not only did you stop my attacks, you also managed to cut my steel wires I used to try to entangle you at the same time." True to his word, threads of steel wire that Naruto had cut to prevent himself from being caught now littered the ground between them. "You're quite skilled for someone so young." "Save your critiques for someone who gives a damn," the blonde snarled. This time, it was Naruto that started the confrontation, projecting several nameless blades and launching them at masked swordsmen, forcing him to dodge to his left, leaving no avenue for escape. Naruto lunged forward to intercept him. "Spirit and technique," he shouted, throwing the twin swords at his opponent. The spinning black and white blades circled around at Kashimaru, who just barely managed to deflect both blades. Flawless and firm. Kashimaru lunged with Nuibari and thrust it at Naruto's open throat. Naruto swayed his body to the side, barely dodging the attack as Nuibari grazed his neck before tracing a second pair of blades and parrying it away from his throat with Bakuya. Those who watched just wondered why Naruto was reciting poetry. "Our strength rips the mountains." Naruto continued chanting. "Our swords split the water." He thrust Kanshu at Kashimaru's chest, forcing the swordsman to leap back while taking a defensive stance. Suddenly, the pair of blades Naruto had thrown earlier came spinning back towards Kashimaru. With little time to dodge, the twin blades cut through the swordsman's flesh, making him gasp in pain. "Our names reach the Imperial Villa. The two of us cannot hold heavens together." Naruto leaped into the air. He flooded both swords with chakra, but instead of just strengthening them, he used his chakra to destabilize the very compositions of the swords themselves. The massive amounts of energy used to create those swords, now an unstable existence. Before the disbelieving eyes of those who watched, the swords extend behind him, the steel growing into splintered wings, making Naruto look like some kind of angel of death. "Crane Wing 3 Realm," he shouted as he brought down both swords upon his enemy. Kashimaru's eyes widened in surprise at the oncoming attack. Having nowhere to dodge, he futilely tried to block the oncoming attack with Nuibari. The twin swords exploded and the steel shattered, each fragment becoming a jagged knife aimed at the enemy. Kashimaru never stood a chance. His body was torn asunder as the shrapnel ripped through his flesh and sent him flying back into a collapsing house. Tracing a new set of blades, Naruto walked towards dying man. Kashimaru coughed up blood. The majority of his vital organs had either ruptured or had been completely destroyed, and not even Tsunade herself could have saved him from his wounds. Looking up into the frigid eyes of his soon-to-be killer, he whispered, "What are you?" "My name is Aozaki Naruto." The Naruto answered quietly, "And I am your death." "Aozaki? Kekek, I see." Kashimaru smirked in amusement just before the boy swung. The entire fight had lasted less than 25 seconds. Silence reigned across the clearing as the lone head rolled across the ground. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed as a light breeze blew by playfully rustling his hair and coat. Even to those that had known Naruto and already watched him fight with incredible skill over the past few months, it was still quite a battle to have witnessed. For several moments, nobody spoke. They knew instinctively that somehow words would detract from the profound sense of catharsis that they all seemed to be currently sharing. Now was a time to reflect upon the battle, to think about the lives they had taken, the lives they had lost, and to remind themselves just why it was they were fighting. Naruto. And just like that, it was ruined. Annoyed, Naruto turned towards the sound of the voice that had called him. He had sensed the 5 chakra sources in the trees earlier, before he had killed Jinpachi with Hrunting. Assuming they were some kind of backup force for the Kiri Nins, he had waited for them to come to make their move, to come to the aid of their compatriots so that he could counter-ambush them. When they continued to observe, he had switched his assumption to the role of smaller rebel factions or foreign shinobi teams sent to monitor them by neighboring hidden villages that must have been anxious at the recent upheaval in Kiri. He was half right. What he did not expect, however, was to see that woman he refused to call her his mother again. A flood of emotion passed through his face, sorrow, pain, and then rage. "You!" he hissed as he gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes. "You!" A mixture of leftover adrenaline from his previous fight and his own personal emotions clouded Naruto's judgment and caused him to panic. Immediately, his flight or fight instincts kicked in, and like most situations he had even felt them, he chose to fight. Kushina's run slowed to a hesitant stop as Naruto let loose an uncharacteristically feral roar and lunged towards her, his twin swords, still bloodied from having killed Kashimaru, arched behind him. Naruto didn't see anyone else. He couldn't hear Sarutobi calling for him to stop. He couldn't see Itachi, Kakashi, or Jiraiya already rushing forwards to stop him. All he could see or hear was the woman responsible for so much of his pain and sorrow. The woman that was partly responsible for having taken away his real mother. The reaction was immediate on both sides. Sarutobi had already summoned up his bow staff and slammed it into Naruto's abdomen, forcing the blonde's body to come to a lurching halt. Itachi got behind Naruto, grabbed his left arm and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to drop Kanshu. Jiraiya also landed behind him and wrapped his arm around Naruto's neck, holding him in place. And Kakashi had pulled out a kunai and blocked Bakuya inches away from Kushina's face. Kakashi couldn't help but notice that the white and silver falchion nearly cut all the way through the carbon steel of his own blade. The reaction of the Kiri rebels came nearly a second later. Zabuza appeared behind Itachi and Jiraiya, his Kubikirabacho poised to cut them both in half. Haku also appeared nearby, creating dozens of ice senbons around the group, and Suijutsu also formed behind Kakashi, a kunai poised at his throat. Kushina had frozen and, like Naruto, was unaware of anyone else around them. She couldn't tear herself away from his eyes, terrified of what she saw within them. Hatred, anger, she had already expected those, but most of all pain, the pain of having been betrayed, the pain of having been abandoned by those you trusted. Naruto's crystal blue eyes were now the Kyuubi's red, as a crimson shroud slowly began enveloping his body, his mind threatening to give into the bloodlust of the fox's chakra. The tense standoff continued for several moments when Naruto closed his eyes before finally relaxing his body. The red chakra receded and he dispelled his projections. When he opened his eyes again, they were a clear, emotionless blue once more, with no signs of any of the rage they had contained moments before. The rebels followed his lead a second later. Zabuza relaxed from his stance and hefted his cleaver onto his shoulder, not exactly poised to attack, but still ready to strike should the need arise. Haku dropped the ice senbon, and Suijutsu removed the kunai from Kakashi's throat. Hesitantly, the Konoha group did the same. The entire time, neither Naruto nor Kushina took their eyes off one another. "I don't know what you're doing here," Naruto told her coldly, "and personally I don't care. If you're here to take me back to that hellhole, then you're wasting your time." "Wait, Naruto, please come home. Your parents have missed you these past 5 years and they regret what they've done," Kakashi told him. Naruto's eyes flickered to Kakashi before moving back to Kushina. "Is that supposed to mean something to me?" he asked coldly. "Since the day I could form coherent thoughts, I've never once considered Konoha to be my home, and I've never once considered the Namikazes to be my family." The words cut into Kushina's gut like a rusty knife. "You are not my mother. The only parent I ever had was my real mother, Mana Aozaki, and I have no reason to give a damn about what some random woman thinks." Tears swelled in Kushina's eyes, and her legs gave out from under her as she broke down crying into a sobbing wreck. Naruto wouldn't forgive her. She had lost her own son, and even worse, she had been replaced by another woman. The worst part was that she knew she had no one else to blame but herself for this fiasco. "I'm so sorry, my Sachikun," Kushina whispered as she sat on her knees chanting a stream of apologies. "Naruto," Jiraiya yelled. He may not have been the most sensitive of persons, but there was something fundamentally wrong in principle about a woman that was as tough and exuberant as Kushina breaking down in tears. Naruto glanced at the toad Sannin. "And who the hell are you?" "I'm Jiraiya. I was supposed to be you godfather." For once, the Sannin abstained from his usual pomp and exultation when introducing himself. Naruto raised a brow. "Funny, I don't ever remember having talked to you once." Jiraiya tried hard to suppress a cringe at that statement as he frantically tried to remember if there had been a time he had even once acknowledged Naruto's presence in the Namikaze household. He slumped his shoulders in shame when he couldn't. "As much I enjoy watching a good drama," Zabuza drawled as he cut in. "I really don't think this is the right time or place to be doing this right now." And that was the truth of the matter. By now, most of the villagers had fled in fear, leaving behind only the corpses of combatants. As much as he wanted to help them, their presence would only bring them more danger, and having to escort civilians to their group would only slow them down. Soon Yagura would be sending reinforcements, and they would have to make their escape quickly. Naruto nodded, easily ignoring the sobs of the woman behind him. "We should start heading back." He agreed. Suijutsu walked over to where Jinpachi had died and hefted Shibuki into the air, the sword he had dropped prior to the ambush, which by some miracle managed to survive the attack. Suijutsu gave the sword an experimental twirl in his hands and said, "Just so you know, I'm keeping this." The next time, though, could you try not to destroy the legendary weapons of the guys you face? Not all of us can just waltz around creating any sword we want just by looking at them, you know. Naruto resisted the urge to face Palm. It was good to know that his friend knew his priorities. Why are you following us again? Naruto snarled. Both the rebels and the Konoha team had quickly set off from the site of the battle as they headed towards the Sanada Mountains, though not before Naruto had left behind a couple hundred clones to bury the dead. They were close now, and dawn was soon approaching, the red orb already creeping over the horizon. Our mission was to bring you home, Naruto, Itachi told him in his usual monotone. Until that mission is complete, we cannot return to Konoha. You know damn well as I do, that place has never been my home, Itachi and I. Naruto hissed. And even if you all manage to overpower me and try to take me back by force, which I admit you could probably do, I'll have you know I can create swords inside my body. I could probably stab through all 8 of my vital points in less than a split second, and kill myself before you even come close to taking me. Sarutobi was taken aback by that. That's a little extreme, isn't it, Naruto? Naruto snorted. Jiji, there wasn't a single day that passed by in that village when I haven't considered killing myself. You should know better than most that there are far worse things in life than death. The old man nodded sadly. He had an inkling of what the blonde had gone through during his time in Konoha, but he never imagined that it had been so bad Naruto would have been willing to end his own life to escape it. Behind them, Itachi shifted, but gave no other reaction to the anger he felt at Naruto's treatment during his childhood. A sniffle came from the rear of the group where Kakashi and Jiraiya were supporting Kushina, who had silently been weeping tears for most of the way there. Naru-chan, she whispered. We're almost there. Naruto called out. The group emerged from the woods into a large clearing where the rebel camp had been situated. The camp was situated within large stone barricades that formed a wide square within the clearing. On each corner, tall watchtowers had been erected to keep a lookout on the nearby surroundings. Inside the fortifications, rows upon rows of tents had been pitched, denoting a large amount of inhabitants. The guards at the entrance immediately recognized the group and let them pass, but only after Naruto and Zabuza had finished explaining why 5 Konoha nins had been in their group. Many people bustled around the inside, some cooking on open fire pits, while others were bandaging the less serious injuries and wounds of comrades and friends. The Konoha team couldn't help but notice how the Kiri rebels seemed to look up to Naruto despite his young age. As they walked towards the center of the camp, many politely called out greetings, and Naruto answered them concisely in turn. It was strange to see grown men showing a 13-year-old child, albeit an extremely powerful 13-year-old child, such deference and respect. Even Itachi, who had become an Anbu captain at the same age as Naruto, remembered how hard of a time he had trying lead squad members that were more than double his age at that time. Here, Naruto had neither the advantage of coming from a powerful clan nor was he even a native to this country, and yet he commanded their absolute attention as though he had been doing so his entire life. Finally, they reached what was obviously a command tent, judging from the fact that it was simply far more sizable and ornate than the rest. They walked in and saw a woman talking to some men. When she saw them, she gestured for the men to leave, which they did, and left the group alone with her. Jiraiya giggled perversely. The woman was very beautiful. She had long, flowing auburn hair that came down to her ankles. She wore a long-sleeved, dark blue dress that left her shoulders and her generous cleavage bare, a sight which Jiraiya greatly appreciated. Sorry we're late, May. Naruto greeted. Naruto, Zabuza. The woman greeted. It's unusual for you to be this tardy. Did something happen along the way? Zabuza chuckled. Actually, I met some of my former comrades in the 7 last night. I have to admit it was pretty nostalgic seeing them again. May widened her eyes and looked to Naruto for a more detailed explanation. We came across Kushimaru Kurairer and Jinpachi Manashi in a sizable patrol last night and defeated them. Naruto explained. They were slaughtering a small village down by the mountains a few miles away from here. There's no way in hell Yagura would have sent 2 of the 7 swordsmen for a routine patrol. If my guess is correct, then I'd say that Yagura is very close to finding our hideout if he hasn't already. May nodded in agreement with Naruto's assessment of the situation. I agree, she said. I knew we couldn't expect to hide forever, but I didn't think he would find us this quickly. Yagura's always been a resourceful bastard. Zabuza added his own 2 cents in. It just means we'll have to gather our boys faster. Mei hummed in thought as her eyes drifted over to the Konoha team and widened in recognition. Naruto-kun. She called sweetly, "Could you please explain to me why some of Konoha's most dangerous ninjas from the bingo book, two of them being a Sannin and the former Hokage, are here right now?" Oh boy, she added the kun suffix to his name. Naruto knew that could either be really bad or really good, and he wasn't sure which one it was right now. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Mei, remember how you said my past didn't matter as long as I was loyal to the rebellion? The situation's changed." The Kunoichi's eyes flashed dangerously. How exactly? Naruto suppressed a sigh and began explaining the story of his childhood, about the Kyuubi, his neglect, his training, and how he had run away and met Mana that same fateful night. Throughout the story, Kushina had lowered her head in shame, unable to meet the gaze of anyone that looked her way. Haku glanced at Naruto and felt a twinge of sympathy, also knowing what it was like to not have any real parent figure until he had met Zabuza. As for Zabuza, though, he just shrugged it off. After all, he had seen far more tragic stories before during his life. When he had finished, Mei sighed as she sat back down onto a small chair, rubbing her temples in circular motions to ease her headache before looking up to address the Konoha team. "And I suppose you're here to take him back to Konoha?" It wasn't a question. "While I agree Naruto may have been wronged," Sarutobi began, "his family desires a chance to make amends, and even then there are many of us besides his immediate family that miss his presence and wish for him to return." Mei mulled over this carefully for a moment before replying. "When Naruto first joined us, I was told that his mother was Mana Aizaki, a former Kiri Kunoichi who I had always admired even before the purge, but I never imagined something like this would ever happen. The rebels of Kiri have no desire for a war against Konoha," she told him, "nor do we intend on going against your wishes. However, the organization of our forces is closer to that of an alliance between the many rebel factions that had banded together to fight. Being a leader of one of the Burebusu, Naruto technically doesn't have to answer to anyone, and therefore there is no one here that can force him to return. He explicitly stated from the very beginning that his loyalty lay only with his ideals, and that he intended to leave once Yagura and his forces had been defeated. We accepted this condition despite its inherent risk since Naruto was, and still is, a necessary ally. As Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, he is the only one amongst us who can even hope to defeat Yagura." For the Konoha team, it was a lot of startling information to swallow at once. To begin with, the fact that Naruto was the leader of the Burebesu came as a bit of a surprise. In hindsight, while Zabuza had never shown Naruto the same deference they had seen from many of the Kiri rebels during the time they'd been there, Zabuza had always turned over the actual command of the group to Naruto and accepted his decisions without question. The idea that one of the most bloodthirstiest of the 7 legendary swordsmen of the Mist would look to a 13-year-old boy for leadership, regardless of how powerful and intelligent that said boy may be, was nearly incomprehensible. If that wasn't mind-boggling enough, Naruto was apparently now the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. Once more, they realized it was probably something they should already have known. During the confrontation when Naruto had almost killed Kushina, he had been leaking out a fair amount of the Kyuubi's chakra. That should have been obvious. However, the main question now was how the hell did Naruto come to possess its chakra? "Wait a minute," Kakashi said, reaching for the back of his pouch and pulling out a tri-pronged kunai. "Sensei needs to know about this. Would you mind if I summoned the Hokage here right now?" Mei nodded in response. Naruto's gaze lingered on the Hurishin kunai before he scowled. "I really don't feel like having to deal with that bastard right now. Can I leave this to you, Mei?" he asked her. The buxom woman nodded, really hating the fact that she had chosen to become the overall leader of the movement against Yagura. Naruto dipped his head in gratitude and walked towards the entrance of the tent. As he did so, Kushina moved to follow him, most likely to try and talk to him again. "Don't," he snapped at her coldly. He really did not want to have to deal with his former family right now. He shook his head and nearly stormed out of the tent, followed by Haku and Zabuza. Silently, Hiruzen also slipped out of the tent and followed Naruto, something the blonde-haired Jinchuriki did not object to. As they made their way outside, Naruto gestured for the Sandaime to keep walking with him. For a few moments, they walked quietly down the endless aisles of tents until Zabuza finally decided to break the silence. "So you're the son of the hotshot Yondaime Hokage, huh?" He shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe I didn't see the resemblance. Still, I suppose I shouldn't be too surprised, huh?" It's just like Mana to adopt some neglected kid. Naruto hid his surprise, not having heard much about his mother's past. I wasn't aware you knew her. I never knew her personally, but I did meet her once. Zabuza told him. Back when I was about 15 during the time I joined the Seven Swordsmen, he recounted. Yagura began ordering the execution of a few clans, calling them traitors of the state. Back then, no one could have even imagined that it would lead to the Kekari Genkai massacre it became. Well, no one except Mana, that is. When she organized a large escape with a bunch of survivors from those persecuted clans, Yagura ordered me, Reiga, and a large Anbu squad to wipe them out. Naruto stopped to stare at Zabuza. Reiga, as in Reiga Kurasuke, wasn't he also a member of the Seven? Zabuza nodded. Yagura wanted to use this opportunity as a show of force, to show what would happen to those that opposed him. What happened? Zabuza admitted sheepishly as he scratched his head. At the time, Mana had a reputation for being soft-hearted, idealistic, and naive, and like a complete fool I mistook that for weakness. He shook his head, chuckling. She completely destroyed us. From the very get-go, she turned the tables against us and made me know what it felt like to be completely outclassed. The only reason she didn't kill us that day was because she would have been ashamed if she killed a bunch of immature brats. Haku widened his eyes. She must have been very strong for you to say something like that, Zabuza-sama. I admired her for her strength, Zabuza admitted, but most of all I admired her for her conviction. She wasn't strong despite being kind and idealistic. She was strong because she was kind and idealistic. Think about it, Haku. She lived a country where hundreds of people were being slaughtered every day, and yet, no matter what, she always did her best to save everyone she could, not once wavering in her beliefs. Anyone else would have become disillusioned and lost faith in themselves. Most people did, but Mana Aozaki held on to her conviction like iron through the hell she had lived through her entire life. Naruto snorted. She was very strong. She kicked my ass in every one of our spars. He agreed. Why didn't you ever tell me about this before? You never asked, the demon of the mist replied, smirking under his mask of bandages. But to be honest, when I first saw you in Nami no Kuni, I knew you had to be her son. You had the same eyes as she did, strong eyes. That's why no one ever doubted you when you told us you were her son. Even if you look nothing alike, you act so much like her it's uncanny. A faint and melancholic smile touched Naruto's lips. I like to think that 95% of all good things within me began with her. The other 5% began within Jiji here, along with Satsuki-chan, Itachi-Niasen, and Mikoto Obasan. Sarutobi smiled warmly. She must be a great person for both of you to speak of her so highly. Naruto nodded in agreement. She was. Kid, please tone down that sappy shit. Zabuza gagged. You'll make me throw up and then I'd have to undo my bandages. Naruto just chuckled. Parting ways with Zabuza and Haku, Naruto and Hiruzen continued to walk towards a small hill on the west side of the encampment. As he reached the top of the hill, a small breeze passed by and ruffled his hair for several moments. Tension left his body as he relaxed, releasing a large sigh as he did so. It's been a long time, Naruto. Hiruzen smiled, opening his arms for a hug, one which Naruto eagerly returned. I missed you too, Jiji, Naruto told him. I wish you informed me of your departure beforehand, Naruto, so I wouldn't have had a heart attack when I saw your name on the emancipation document a few days after you left. Naruto scratched his head sheepishly. I'd been planning the emancipation form thing for a few years actually, but my actual running away was something more spontaneous than anything. Sorry about that. Sarutobi chuckled. Don't worry about it, Naruto-kun. I'm just glad you're all right. So how's Satsuki? She is doing well, Naruto, but she misses you quite dearly. Naruto grimaced nervously. She isn't too angry that I left, is she? She was furious when you left. His surrogate grandfather told him, sympathetically, but she was more heartbroken later on by your absence. Naruto groaned. I feel bad, I really do. I know I should have sent a postcard or something, but it was too risky, Jiji. I couldn't have done it without having it tracked back to me. Maybe I should visit sometime when all this is over. Hiruzen smiled. That seems like a great idea, Naruto. You might want to wear a helmet, though. He added with a small smile. Naruto nodded dejectedly. I know. Satsuki would probably try to punch straight through his skull the minute she sees him. Naruto. A familiar voice called. Naruto closed his eyes and instinctively flexed his hands the way he always did whenever he prepared to trace Kanchu and Bakuya. He recognized the voice far more than he would have liked. It was the voice of the man he had perhaps detested more than anyone else. Turning around, he spotted Minato Namikaze, the man who was the most responsible for his pain and suffering, striding towards him. Naruto knew all too well how much he looked like the man, and he absolutely hated it. Behind him, Naruto spotted the rest of the Konoha team walking close behind. "Naruto, it's good to see you again, my son," Minato said, coming to a stop before him. "A parent that abandons their own child is no parent at all." Naruto snarled, "You know damn well as I do that you have no right to call me your son." A pained expression crossed the older blonde's face. "Naruto, I know I wasn't the best father in the world, but I still care about you and I want us to be a family again," Minato told him, hoping to earn his forgiveness. "You mean the family that abused and neglected me for 8 years?" Naruto asked, his tone snarky. "Yes, but we want to make it up to you. I want to make it up to you as a father. A father that stuck a demon in my gut and pretty much left me to die in a village." Naruto asked in the same tone. "Naruto, what do you want me to say? I'm sorry." Minato cried frantically. "Oh, you're sorry for treating me like complete trash and letting the villagers use me as a punching bag?" Naruto asked angrily. It was a very precarious situation at that time. Wow, even Minato had to admit that sounded pretty bad. "Well then, clearly that justifies everything and I should completely forgive you," Naruto told him in a voice that was far too sweet to be true. "You're being sarcastic, aren't you?" Naruto smiled fondly. "Yeah, I learned that from my real mother, you know, the one that actually loved and took care of me when I was little." "Right," the yondaime answered awkwardly. "The mother I would never have met if you hadn't been such horrible parents." Right, that mother? For the love of all things holy, this was getting depressing. Well, depressing for him anyways, he had no idea what Naruto was thinking. Still, Minato pressed on bravely. "Naruto, Sensei told me you used the Kyuubi's chakra. How did you come into possession of the fox?" Naruto glared at him. "Why does Konoha want its weapon back?" He drawled, his voice laced with barely restrained fury. "No, I just wanted to know." Minato told him sadly. What was he going to do? He couldn't force Naruto to come back to Konoha. That would only end in disaster, and from what he had heard from Kakashi and Jiraiya, taking Naruto away by force would only earn the hostility of the rebel Kirinins for taking away their hero. Naruto glared at him suspiciously for a moment before rummaging one of his pockets and taking out a small crystal pendant. He tossed it at Minato, and the latter caught deftly and noticed that there were several advanced and complex sealing arrays inscribed into the structure of the gem. "That's a memory crystal," he told him. "I sealed some of my memories in it so you can just concentrate your chakra into it to activate it." Hesitantly, Minato followed his instructions and focused his chakra into the crystal. A bright flash flared momentarily, briefly blinding those who stood in close proximity. A moment later, they opened their eyes to find that their surroundings had completely changed. They found themselves in the middle of a dirt path, probably somewhere near the border edges of Hai no Kuni, Fire Country, if the surrounding lush green forests were of any indication. "A genjutsu," Kushina whispered in awe. "I see, the seal must have converted his memories into a series of illusionary images." The sound of laughter caught the group's attention, and they looked towards the sound to see Naruto flying high in the air, whooping in enjoyment. He was riding on a large, double-bladed sword. The blades had been shaped into large spades, wide enough so that Naruto could rest his feet on top of them as platforms, and were joined together in the middle by a large, two-handed hilt. Naruto used the sword to gain several meters of altitude before plunging from the sky, pulling out from the dive just above the ground beside a silver-haired woman. The woman wore a gray trench coat with a black shirt and blue jeans underneath. Mana chuckled as she glanced at Naruto. "You know, I think you're having a bit too much fun playing around with your new sword." Naruto returned the smile with one of his own as he stood on his makeshift platform. Naruto smiling. For Kushina, the very idea was so alien to her it has virtually incomprehensible. It was not the sardonic sneers or bitter smiles he had worn earlier, but a true smile, denoting genuine happiness and joy. It occurred to her she had never seen her son smile before, and watching him do so now was like basking in warm sunlight. For a moment she felt nothing but burning envy for this woman who seemed to receive all of her son's smiles, laughs, and affection like a commodity. "Hey, don't blame everything on me, Kasan. You're the one who made me this custom blade so I could do this in the first place," he responded teasingly. "And besides, it was one of the few birthday presents I ever got." Naruto's voice deflated near the end, something Mana clearly noticed. She frowned for a moment before smiling once more and ruffling his head. Well, I'll see what I can do to fix that, she promised, making him brighten up and smile once more. I have to admit, though, she continued, you did a damned good job of improving the futon and anti-gravity Fuinjutsu arrays I already inscribed onto the thing. Your idea of using Katen Fuinjutsu to create a jet propulsion was absolutely genius. That's something I haven't even considered. Pleased with the praise, Naruto grinned and decided to return one of his own. I did learn from the best after all. Mana chuckled. Suck up, so have you thought of a name for the thing yet? She asked. Naruto raised an eyebrow. A name. He paused for a moment. I guess I should name it since all my other special swords have names. I can't just go around calling it that sword after all. HMMMMMM, what about Huryu? He asked her. Flying Dragon, huh? She smiled. It's a fitting name considering its abilities. Yash, Naruto pumped a fist into the air. From this day forward, this sword will be known as. Both Naruto and Mana stopped dead in their tracks as an inhuman roar shook the very earth they were standing on. Naruto swung around and widened his eyes in disbelief as he saw a malicious red streak of chakra hurtling towards them at unimaginable speeds. Naruto reinforced his eyes, and to his growing horror, he saw what could only be the chakra form of the Kyuubi no Yoko coming right for him. Thinking quickly after deducing that the Yoko could only be after him, Naruto flared a burst of chakra into the newly named Huryu and streaked off away from Mana, ignoring her shouts of protest. Sure enough, the crimson-red streak immediately adjusted its trajectory to come after him. Scowling, Naruto poured even more chakra into his sword, increasing his speed even further. Huryu had been Naruto's 12th birthday present from Mana, given to him only a few weeks prior. In itself, Huryu was a testament to human ingenuity and the unlimited potential in the art of sealing. Mana had used her elemental seals to create anti-gravity and wind seals within the layers of steel in blades in order to create a sword that could not only fly at extremely high speeds, but also maintain a stable platform for its user at the same time. From there, Naruto had further enhanced its already heightened speed by adding flame elemental seals onto the rear blade, and aligning them so that its flames would maintain a jet-propelled thrust. Though Naruto hadn't fully tested its capabilities yet, he already knew for certain that Huryu could easily break the sound barrier as it was doing now. Yet no matter how much chakra he pumped into the sword, the red chakra beast was steadily catching up to him, threatening to overcome the gap if he didn't do something drastic anytime soon. He zigzagged through the nearby canyon, ducking through crevices and whizzing past treetop canopies, but not matter what he put between himself and the fox, the Nine Tails simply destroyed them as though they were mere trifles and kept gaining distance on him. Is this it? I am really going to die. Naruto thought. He could feel his chakra coils burning from the exertion and his concentration slipping over the control of Huryu. Fearing for his life, he looked back at the oncoming pursuer, and that moment of distraction was all that was needed for him to crash into a tall tree branch, sending him spiraling out of control and into the rocky cliffside. He reinforced his body to brace himself for the oncoming collision, but even so, he could feel his ribs crack under the impact as he watched the Kyuubi hurtle towards him before his world went red. He was in a field of blades. Naruto rose from where he was lying down and checked his surroundings, immediately recognizing them for what it really was: unlimited blade works, the physical embodiment of his innermost perceptions, his very soul itself. But why the hell was he here now? So, my container has finally decided to visit me. A voice behind him drawled. Naruto whirled himself around and nearly flinched at what he found himself facing. It was the very same nine-tailed monster that had attacked Konoha 12 years ago. The giant fox was pinned down on each limb by monolithic black gears. Golden chains, which Naruto recognized to be Enkindu, were wrapped around his body, further binding the already trapped fox. You're the Kyuubi, Naruto said, unable to get his mental capabilities beyond the already obvious. Instinctively, he traced a copy of Kanshu and Bakuya in his hands and held them in a defensive position. What's going on? What have you done? He growled. The fox snorted. I couldn't have done anything if I tried, Kit. You're going to blame someone. Then blame your father. He's the one that fucked up the ceiling 12 years ago. Naruto's glare hardened. What the hell are you talking about? Kyuubi laughed bitterly. If you haven't realized the answer already, then you must be dumber than I thought. The answer is already in your hands, moron. Dumbfounded, Naruto's thoughts drifted to the twin sword in front of him. Kanshu and Byakuya represented the principle of yin and yang. They were named after the blacksmith that had forged them and his wife, after she had thrown herself into the furnace to give those swords divinity through human sacrifice. Because of their married status, Kanshu and Byakuya contained a strong bond of attraction, and therefore it was said that they would always find its way back to the other even if they were separated. Naruto widened his eyes as realization dawned upon him. Yin and yang are two parts of the same whole, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Because they're two parts of the same existence, one cannot exist without the other. Growing horror pervaded his voice as he looked up at the Kyuubi angrily. So it's only natural there should be some kind of attraction between the two. Even if it was slow at first, that force of attraction could easily over time wear down any seal that tries to contain it. You knew this, didn't you? The Kyuubi smiled but didn't answer. He didn't need to. A stream of curses erupted from Naruto's mouth. You son of a bit, a hand gently grabbed his shoulder, causing him to instinctively whirl around and face in that direction. To his shock and bewilderment, he found himself facing Mana once more. Ka-san, what? How? What? Mana smiled momentarily and amused at her son's state of confusion before her expression turned angry, immediately making Naruto wonder if it was even there in the first place. She drew her hand back and rapped it against the side of his face, shutting up any more of his pathetic attempts to form a proper sentence. Did you really think I wouldn't follow if you just went flying off like that? She asked, her voice stern. But Naruto began, unable to form coherent thoughts. Looks like an angry Mana was something he was not prepared to deal with. Mana grabbed both sides of his head and leaned forward until their foreheads almost touched. It isn't a kindness to try and keep me away from danger, Naruto, especially when that danger involves you. She sighed as she tried to make her surrogate son understand what she was trying to say. I told you the day we met that you weren't a burden to me, and since then you've become something much, much more. Every time you grieve, I share a part of that pain. Every time you laugh, your happiness becomes mine. The moments we've shared, the trials we've endured, all those things have made you a part of who I am. So there's no reason to feel guilty about putting me in danger. It's my duty to protect you, because you are my son. Unshed tears welled in Naruto's eyes. Thank you. He settled for the simple answer, unable to form a more complex sentence than that at the present. Mana smiled briefly for a moment before becoming serious once again. Naruto, right now I'm communicating with you through your seal, but that won't last long. Your seal is breaking apart, and I don't know how long I can keep it contained. The yang chakra of the Kyuubi is trying to get to the yin and break out. Naruto told her, can you reapply the seal from the outside? Mana nodded, hesitating a bit. I can, but you're going to have to subdue from the inside first. It's the only way to keep the chakra stable enough for the sealing. Naruto's eyes widened. How am I supposed to do that? He asked. I mean, I could try and use Enkindu, but even then it's a long shot. Maybe, but it's our only hope, she answered. I'll see what I can do to help you from the outside. The Kyuubi, who had been listening intently until now, finally decided to speak up. As much as he tried to deny it, he would have been lying if he said he wasn't a little touched by the speech Mana had given earlier. In a way, it reminded him of his own relationship with the Rikudo no Sennin, sage of 6 paths, many centuries ago. You know, he told them, you look like you could use some help. If Naruto here can hold down my yang chakra long enough, then I could force my consciousness into it and put it under control again. After that, the little missy here can reapply the seal. Mana frowned in suspicion. And what would you stand to gain by helping us, Kyuubi? Unless... Mana's eyes widened in horrified realization. Don't tell me you actually enjoy being inside my son. She accused, pointing her finger at the Kyuubi in accusation while being completely oblivious to the double entendre in her choice of words. The giant fox did a spit take as he choked in mid-breath and starting coughing to try to regain control of his lungs once more. What? No. It's not like I like the kit or feel responsible for this mess or anything. The Kyuubi yelled angrily. What would otherwise have been an extremely frightening expression was turned comical by the fact that he was obviously very flustered, a shade of red clearly noticeable on his cheeks. And don't say it like that. It makes me sound like some kind of pervert. It's just that I'd much rather be here than be under Madara's control again. Why, yeah, that's right. I'm just looking out for my own interests. The most powerful of all Bijis is Tsundeer. Both Mana and Naruto shared the same thought, although neither was foolhardy enough to give voice to it. And who the hell's Madara? Look, we're wasting time right now. Kyuubi yelled, focusing their attention to the matter at hand. My yang half is almost done breaking through your seal. Naruto, release the yin half of my chakra to me. You and I are going to have to subdue yang long enough for your mother to reapply the seal again. With only a little hesitation, Naruto grabbed the small paper seal attached to one of the gears and ripped it off, releasing Kyuubi from his bonds. The enormous gears shifted off of him, and Enkidu slid off him, as well as the fox stood for the first time in many years and gave his muscles a tentative stretch. Damn, Kit, you have no idea how good this feels. Naruto smirked. You know, it has been about a decade or so since you've last been out. Are you sure you're not going to get rusty on me? The giant fox snorted. Kit, you could lock me away for 100 years and I'd still be deadly at the end of it. That's enough, Mana interjected. Naruto, my connection to your mindscape is starting to break just like the sea. Once I'm gone, it'll be up to you and Kyuubi to subdue the yang chakra. Once you've done that, I'll seal it from the outside. Naruto nodded, his expression conveying the doubt he felt. Right, fight and beat the giant red chakra fox of death while begrudgingly teaming up with the said fox's twin half. No pressure, got it? Mana smiled before leaned down and embraced Naruto reassuringly. You have nothing to be afraid of, Naruto. Maybe if you were alone, your burdens would have been too much to bear. But you're not alone, I'm right here. You will always have me here by your side. Now let's take this furball down. Mana's smile shifted into a smirk. After all, I didn't raise my son to be a freaking wuss, now did I? Naruto grinned. Hell no. With that, the connection vanished, and Mana disappeared as she returned to the real world. Meanwhile, the seal completely deteriorated, letting the Yang Kyuubi into the mindscape, as a giant red fox rose up from the ground of his mindscape and faced them menacingly several hundred meters away. For a moment, Naruto recognized the absolute ridiculousness/epicness of his current situation. Seriously, what other 13-year-old, or any human being for that matter, expects to single-handedly face down the Kyuubi no Yoko inside his freaking mindscape? The Kyuubi glanced at Naruto, noting his expression. We're going to have to pin down Yang long enough for me to take control of it. He smirked. So are you good to go, Kit, or do I need to give you some time, go get all sentimental and shit? Naruto snorted. Sorry, but we Aozakis don't do sentimental, we kick ass. With that, he traced 3 swords. Kanshu and Bakuya were in his left and right hands respectively, while Huryu was traced right below his feet, letting him close the gap in an instant. With Kyuubi following close behind, a battle of the ages was soon underway. It took an overwhelming 3 hours for Naruto and the Kyuubi to finally subdue the Yang chakra. Throughout it all, both combatants had been bruised and wounded many times, Naruto especially. There had been several moments when defeat seemed imminent for the two, only for one of them to pull something completely insane out of their asses and somehow make it actually work. In the end, though, Kyuubi finally managed to stun the Yang Chakra Fox just long enough with a weakened version of the tailed beast ball for Naruto to tie it down with Enkidu. It was a mixture of pure luck and half-assed guesswork that gave them the victory. Enkidu was an anti-divine weapon that had been forged to hold the gods themselves. The higher the divinity, the stronger Enkidu's restrictive properties were. Against a non-divine being, however, Enkidu was nothing more than an extremely strong chain. Surprisingly, however, the Kyuubi itself seemed to possess a high degree of divinity. It made sense, though, since kitsunes have long been worshipped as kami by Shinto Buddhists after all. You know, Naruto began as he stared at the now fully formed Kyuubi sealed behind gigantic steel bars of his cage. Mana had reapplied the seal immediately after they had subdued the Yang chakra. I thought you would have been angrier considering we sealed you back into me. The giant fox snorted. I always keep my word, Kit. I promised to help you, and so I did. I have my pride after all. He paused for a moment, seeming to hesitate about something. Hell, I should actually be thanking you, Kit. You got me back my full chakra, and besides, when you caught Yang with those chains of yours, you could have sealed us separately and taken my chakra for yourself. Did you know that? Naruto nodded. I knew. Then why didn't you? Naruto gave him a tired smile. Because I don't take something that's not mine without permission. That would be rude, and my mother taught me better than that. The Kyuubi stared at Naruto in a mixture of shock and disbelief for several moments before chuckling. You know what, Kit, you're all right. Damned if I know how, but you're a lot better than the other pampered and prissy containers I've had before. Tell you what, the fox told him, if you ever find yourself in trouble, feel free to draw off of my chakra. I can only give you a small portion of it from here, but who knows what might happen in the future." Naruto's eyes widened. He certainly wasn't expecting that. He grinned. "You know what, Kyuubi? You're a pretty alright guy yourself, thanks." Kyuubi snorted. "My name is Kurama, Kit. You can call me by my name from now on." Naruto did an informal two-finger salute. "I look forward to working with you in the future then, Kurama," he said, smiling as he severed the mental link between them and returned to the real world. Naruto's eyes fluttered open as he found himself by the rocky cliff side he had crashed in hours ago when he had been fleeing from the big ball of malevolent chakra. He laughed out loud in disbelief as he got onto his feet. He had done it. Not only had he survived a battle against the Yang chakra, but he now also had access to the full power of the Kyuubi no Yoko. "Did you see that, Kasen? That was easy," he yelled, pumping both fists into the air as he turned towards Mana and froze. Kasen, he whispered. Naruto OSD sadness and sorrow ***. Mana's face was extremely pale, her face sweating bullets as she struggled for breath while leaning back against the cliff. But what made Naruto's heart stop was the fading image of the Shinigami beside her. It didn't take Naruto long to figure out what happened. "Shiki Fujin, dead demon-consuming seal," Naruto said, his voice barely audible. "Why? Why would you do it?" Naruto yelled, pain and anguish clear in his tone. Didn't she understand? Didn't she realize that his life was meaningless without her? Didn't she know how much pain it would cause him to watch her die, that it would be worse than death itself? "Why did you give your life for someone like me?" "Is it strange?" Mana asked, her voice weak as she drew Naruto into an embrace until their foreheads touched, "that we would want to give our lives for the people we love?" She smiled, having said her final words as she closed her eyes for the last time, a small, peaceful smile on her face as though she was sleeping. The crushing despair in Naruto's wide eyes was almost palpable as the bright and innocent face he had sported only moments before was replaced with a pained and anguished one stained by tears. Kushina watched in silent agony as Naruto changed. The light left his cerulean eyes as they became the cold, emotionless glaciers they were now. His face looked harrow and stone cold. Quietly, Naruto rested his face into the crook of Mana's neck. His silent misery soon became racked sobs that echoed across the valley, and then even those became louder as he began screaming curses at the world, cursing it for taking away the one person he had ever loved. Needless to say, for those who were forced to watch this horrid scene, his cries were downright gut-wrenching. And all the while, the sun set into the horizon as the world continued to revolve, unaffected by the cries of a lone boy. The memory ended, and the genjutsu around them dropped as they returned to the real world once more. Kushina could feel tears watering her eyes as she reflected on what she just saw. No matter how much she tried to deny it, it was impossible to have hated Mana after what she had just seen. Not after everything she had done for Naruto. To have not even hesitated for a second to give her life in order to save his. To have faced death without an ounce of fear or regret, instead using her very last breath to try to comfort the small child she had saved from loneliness and despair. Mana Aozaki was such a mother. It was the kind of love and dedication that could only have been expected of a woman of maternal instincts toward a child she cherished. Her actions, selfless and noble as they were, only served to further contrast Kushina's own treatment towards Naruto. She couldn't blame Naruto for refusing to accept her as a mother anymore. If the choice was between a kind and loving adoptive mother and a neglectful birth mother, then it was painfully obvious which one of those two choices he would have chosen. Minato, on the other hand, was seething in self-loathing. For all his famed genius in the art of Fuinjutsu, how the hell could he have forgotten the most basic principles of yin and yang? And now, it was his wife and kids that suffered the consequences of his idiotic and careless mistake. He had never once checked the seal for degradation, completely convinced in the false infallibility of his own sealing abilities. What arrogance. And now that mistake had cost his daughter her career as a kunoichi, his wife her son, and Naruto the person he had considered to be his mother. There weren't enough words to describe how badly he had screwed up. "Naruto," he said as he turned to his son, somehow trying to express just how sorry he was. "I'm not sure what I am anymore." Naruto told him, cutting him off. "But I do know this. I'm not your son. I was raised far too well to be your son. My name is Aozaki Naruto. I have fought, bled, and killed to carry this legacy, and I'll be damned to deepest pits of hell before I let you trample all over it." He spoke with such a calm firmness, it was impossible to doubt his words. For a moment, Silence permeated across the field as both Minato and Kushina lowered their heads in shame, save for the occasional sob or sniffle that came from the latter. The former looked like he wanted to say something until Naruto-sama. Naruto sighed. Seriously, this was the third time in the past 5 hours someone had interrupted one of his conversations by shouting out his name. Naruto turned around and saw a recognized Akiri rebel, Chijuro if he remembered the boy's name correctly, running towards him with a panicked look on his face. As he drew closer, fully coming to a stop in front of him, Naruto noticed a layer of perspiration on his face, his breathing labored from exertion. "There's big trouble. May-sama that you come right away." Naruto raised a brow. "Chijuro, we're the same age, you don't have to add the sama suffix to my name like that. And besides, I just talked to May a few hours ago. I was under the impression I'd have some time to rest before I was assigned another mission." Chijuro shook his head frantically. "It's not that. A scout just came in and Yagura's announced that he's executing the remaining bloodline clans at dawn tomorrow." Naruto's eyes widened with shock as he grabbed Chijuro by the shoulders. "Are you sure that's what he said?" Chijuro nodded. "Please, you have to come right away." Naruto nodded and followed Chijuro as they sprinted towards the center of the camp. The center of the rebel camp was in absolute chaos. Like Naruto, nearly all of the shinobi in the camp had been informed of the news and were now gathered in the meeting grounds, shouting out their own opinion and adding to the general mayhem. Several of the different rebel factions were yelling and arguing about what to do, but no clear voice could be heard in the ruckus. "This is crazy," Kushina commented. "If you think this is bad, then you haven't seen Konoha's council on a bad day." Minato muttered while Hiruzen grunted in agreement. For once, Minato was glad to have finally left the office and left the paperwork to a Kage Bunshin. "Silence!" May's shout gradually quieted the present shinobi, though many of them still murmured softly to one another. "Our scouts reported that the prisoners of the camps are indeed being transported to the valley of Seizo, where Yagura had stationed his main army. Therefore, we can only conclude that he intends to carry out his threat." "It's obviously a trap," Naruto surmised. "If he wanted to just kill them, he could have done it quietly without any of us knowing. That fact that he would announce it like that means that he's expecting us to try and save them." "I know that valley and it's definitely a trap," Ao told them, scowling, adding in his thoughts. "The grottos along those shores are the perfect place to hide an ambush. We walk in and suddenly we're surrounded, nowhere to run." "The best option," May mused, "would be to wait and hold out against Yagura long enough for our allies in Konoha to arrive and assist us in battle." Naruto's head whipped up. "What was that?" "After you left," Ao explained, gesturing to the Konoha team. "May-sama and the Yondaime Hokage-sama agreed to have Konoha support the rebel cause in exchange for an alliance after the Civil War. So now time is on our side, since it's only a matter of time before we receive reinforcements." As he spoke, many of the rebels nodded, murmuring in agreement as they saw the logic in that plan. Naruto mulled over it sadly. The decision made complete sense after all. Not everyone could be saved, and the Red Knight said it best. "Kill one to save 10. Kill 10 to save 100. Kill 100 to save 1,000. And kill 1,000 to save millions." He was no longer a child. He knew that there were times where he wouldn't be able to save everyone, not matter how hard he tried. There were times when the few had to be sacrificed in order to save the many. But then again, there was flip side of the argument. How could he hope to save 10 if he didn't have the courage to save one? There must have been thousands of people down there in that valley, innocent men, women, and children about to be executed for something they never had any power over. So what if there's little to no chance of actually being able to save them? Didn't the Red Knight constantly throw himself into the most dangerous of situations to save the people he did? What was the point of winning if all they were going to do was to replace Yagura's cruel and tyrannical regime with an equally heartless and callous one? Even if the odds were low, they weren't zero. And that, Mana would say, is the most important statistic of all. Naruto smiled. "Well, it looks like I still have a bit of stupid left in me," he thought ruefully. "That would be the smart thing to do." Naruto agreed, "But whoever said I was smart, I'm going to go save them." Nearly every face there turned to him in shock, but in the back of his mind, he could feel Mana's spirit grinning at him. "Weren't you the first one to say that it was a trap?" May asked incredulously. "Yep. And you're still going to go?" "Yep. Do you even have a plan?" Naruto paused in mid-answer as he stopped to think. "Wait, that depends. Does making it up as you go along count as a plan?" Isn't that you've been doing this entire time? Zabuza asked him dryly. Yep. We'd be outnumbered, outsupplied, and outmaneuvered. May protested, hoping to talk Naruto out of this mad scheme. You can't seriously expect any of us to actually go. I expect no one to go, Naruto told her with fierce intensity. Going to save those people is my personal decision, no one else's. If you don't want to go, then you have the right to make that choice, and so do I. Naruto paused as he returned the stares of disbelief. I'm not stupid enough to have any delusions about what I'm getting myself into. I expect neither a glorious or painless death if I fail. Yagura will make sure I suffer down to my last moments, and it will hurt, just like how all sacrifices are meant to hurt. But no matter what happens, I will never abandon my principles, even if they abandon me. Gundam Seed Soundtrack III Track 27, Murahi no Chikai * start. It wasn't his words that gave the Kiri rebels pause. No. If someone else had tried to say the exact same thing, they would have dismissed the man as a fool. However, it was the absolute conviction of Naruto's tone that got their attention. There was something about it that resonated within each of their souls as they stared at the young warrior, completely prepared to face an agonizing death for the sake of something as intangible as a set of principles. Zabuza shook his head and sighed. A 13-year-old Konoha brat and an army of Kiri nins, and it's the brat that has the most balls out of all of us. I'd never live it down if I didn't go. If Zabuza-sama is going, then so am I, Haku stated firmly. Same here, Suitsu shrugged, smiling in a resigned manner. Naruto won't be going alone. May whirled around and looked at the three in disbelief. You can't be serious. My clan and I are going, Suitsu told her firmly. We owe Naruto our lives after all, and besides, I can't help but think that if the clans of Kirigakure during the purge had come together and stood up against Yagura, then none of this would have happened. I don't want to repeat the same mistakes of my parents. Many of the older members cringed as they remembered the absolute callousness of how they had dismissed the slaughter of their rival clans during the early stages of the purge. None of them stopped to consider questioning the actual guilt of these so-called traitor clans, too preoccupied with thinking about how to use those events to further their own standing and power. It wasn't until it was painfully obvious that Yagura was specifically targeting bloodline clans did they realize how grave of mistake that had been. May sighed in resignation. I've seen your group do some extremely reckless things, and this takes the cake by far. But she paused as a small smile crept upon her lips. You can count me in. Me too, Chijiro nodded. I'll protect May-sama's smile if it costs me my life. Ao smacked his palm into his face and sighed. I'm not going to be able to talk you guys out of this, am I? He asked rhetorically, looking around at their determined expressions. Fine, I may as well go too. Someone has to keep you kids from doing anything too crazy. One by one, the present shinobis gave their assent and agreement, smiling despite knowing full well the near-suicidal situation. Suddenly, the possibility of their extremely likely deaths no longer seemed to matter. Or maybe it did matter, only in such a way that they were determined to make those deaths meaningful and sell their lives dearly. Incredible, the Sandaime thought with a small smile on his face. He inspired an entire nation to follow the will of fire without even realizing it. Naruto gave them a lopsided grin. Let's go then. Gundam Seed Soundtrack III Track 27 Murahi no Chikai * end. The rebels crept through the woods in complete darkness as they approached the Valley of Seize. May raised her hand, a signal that traveled down the rest of their dispersed ranks for them to stop and take a small break. Followed by Ao and Chijiro, she walked over to the vanguard of the loose formation where the Burebesu had placed themselves. She spotted Naruto and Zabuza, with the former apparently having an argument with the Konoha team that had tagged along and made a beeline straight for them. Naruto noticed her walking towards her and broke off his argument with his former family so he could turn to meet her. May, he nodded curtly, I've been thinking about this whole situation on our way here. She began. Yagura wouldn't have laid a trap for us in such an obvious manner. Naruto nodded. It was the same conclusion he had come to as well during the way there. No, he probably set the trap without actually expecting us to fall for it. It's likely this whole setup was a way to demoralize us, show us how helpless we really are. Furthermore, he made an announcement in a time frame where we would have to make the decision immediately. There's barely enough time to make it from our camp to Seizo Valley, so we wouldn't have the time to think of a proper plan of attack. Naruto smirked dryly. Looks like he's underestimating both our recklessness and our ingenuity. Bastard! Even so, Yagura would still take the proper precautions just in case. May pointed out, mad he may be, he's not stupid, will be attacking an extremely fortified position. He'll take the physical preparations. Naruto agreed, but he's also very confident. He won't make the mental preparations. We can use that to our advantage. Naruto closed his eyes as he thought back to the maps he had seen back at the camp. In his mind, he visualized a mental copy of the battlefield, taking care to note every detail and feature of the terrain. Immediately, he began running scenarios within his head, trying to figure out Yagura's likeliest possible actions based on what he knew of the man. Ao was right, Naruto said, opening his eyes. Those grottos are the likeliest place for Yagura to hide an ambush. They're deep enough to that even the best of censors would have a hard time finding them, and there's no other place he could hide a large contingent of soldiers. We can lure them out. How would you do that, Naruto-san? Chijuro asked curiously. Two ways, Naruto answered. First, we lure Yagura away from his own army, and then we attack with our full force. It's the only way to threaten the main force enough for them to come out. That's not really luring more than it's walking completely into an ambush like a bunch of idiots. Ao pointed out disapprovingly. Really, if you're not going to take this seriously, we may as well call this off. In May's mind, however, she heard something completely different. Call this off, call this off, call off this engagement. Ao, May called sweetly with a beatific smile on her face. Kindly shut the fuck up before I kill you. Ao immediately clamped his mouth shut, breaking out in cold sweat. Naruto smiled, shaking his head at their antics. They outnumber us by a large number, so we can't afford to hold forced back. He explained. And since Yagura already has a pretty good idea of how many men we have, he'd know if we were holding any sizable force in reserve. But, he added, turning to the Konoha, we do have a force he doesn't know about. May smiled, immediately catching on. I see. He won't expect a team of Konoha shinobi to be on our side, and 6 extremely high-level ninjas could easily change the tide of battle. The grottos may have had their advantages, but they also have their disadvantages. Naruto told them. A small but powerful force could bottleneck them at the entrance and take them apart one by one. Jiraiya leaned over to Sarutobi and whispered, Hey sensei, did you ever teach him strategy? No, Hiruzen answered, shaking his head. He must have learned by reading old history books from the library. Jiraiya whistled in admiration. Damn, the kid's a genius, no doubt about it. May looked over at Minato, who, like the rest of the Naruto retrieval team, had been listening intently. That's the plan so far. Is that fine with you? She asked diplomatically. Minato nodded, impressed by Naruto's strategic analysis of the situation. It is, but who's going to lure Yagura away? I'll do it, Naruto answered calmly. What? Kushina exclaimed in surprise. She wasn't the only one. Everyone around Naruto was looking at him with varying degrees of surprise. It's too dangerous. Frankly, I'm the only one that can fulfill that role, Naruto said dryly. None of you can go, he said, gesturing the Konoha nins, because then he'll know we have outside assistance and will be more cautious. If someone like May or Zabuza fights him, he may feel threatened and stay closer with his army. If I go, he'll underestimate me since I'm only 13 and will feel safer going after me. I'm the strongest of my age group in this army, and with Huryu I'm also the fastest, so I can escape much more easily from Yagura. Minato grimaced. You've thought this through, he admitted. Zabuza snorted. It's ballsy plan, I like it. The sunlight edged over the horizon as dawn approached. Yagura stepped out of his tent into the cold early morning breeze. On both sides, the shinobi that had been on guard outside of his tent snapped to attention. Well, he thought, I guess they didn't show up after all. Not that he expected them to after all. Nearly a kilometer away, however, Naruto watched the Mizukage exit his tent with reinforced eyes. Trace on, he whispered. Naruto raised his left arm horizontally and traced a monstrously large black bow into his hand. In his right, he traced a twisted silver piece of metal that resembled a large drill. The sword shone in brightly as Naruto altered it, reshaping the structure of the sword so that it would be more aerodynamic, now resembling more some kind of distorted arrow. He knocked the projectile into his bow and pulled it back, using the Red Knight's lifetime of experience to ensure that the arrow would hit its mark. My bone shall twist all in its way, Kalidbalg. With those words, he released the string, watching the arrow fly only for a split second before it reached its destination. The shockwave of the explosive force born from the impact released powerful gust of winds that knocked even their own members of the Burabesu off their feet. Down below, the entire landscape had been rearranged, a small crater now surrounded where Yagura had once stood. Tents and structures had been blown away or completely razed, while any and all of Yagura's subordinates that had been standing within 50 meters of him during the initial strike were now nothing more than ribbons of bloody flesh, scattered across the field. The Konoha ninjas that had witnessed the event were shocked beyond belief. Even the usually inexpressive Itachi couldn't hide the sense of shock from his face. Unbelievable. Kakashi breathed, trying to wrap his mind around the absolute devastation he had just seen. Holy shit! Jiraiya swore, his jaw slacking at the sight. How the hell is he still alive? Just as the Toad Sannin said, Yagura stood in the middle of the blast crater, a single tail of the sandbai draped over Yagura, protecting him from the attack. However, the Mizukage didn't exactly escape unharmed. Large burn marks coated the tail he had used to protect himself, as the man grimaced in pain whilst glaring up at Naruto, who was a little less than a kilometer away. However, the important thing was that the Mizukage was unsupported by his followers at the moment. Bleach soundtrack, guitar I** start. Naruto jumped, tracing a copy of Huryu under his feet, and launched himself towards the tyrannical Mizukage, their gazes not once leaving the other. As Huryu ripped across the clearing, making its way closer to Yagura, Naruto waited until he was only 50 meters away from his opponent before slapping an explosive seal onto the sword and back, flipping off of it. Huryu continued to fly towards Yagura, the momentum it had built up continuing to propel itself at Jinchuriki of the sandbai at unimaginable speeds. Yagura leaned back to the right, narrowly avoiding the flying missile as it passed him and exploded, killing several more of his subordinates, not that he really cared anyways. Naruto traced Kanshu and Bakuya as he landed, facing his opponent. Yagura recognized his red cloak almost immediately. "So, you are the Shinkushi?" Yagura commented casually as though he was talking about the weather, at the same time though he pulled his staff off his back and hefted it onto his shoulder. "I expected you to be older. Nevertheless, you will receive no mercy from me, you and the rest of your bloodline scum." Naruto scoffed. "Are you trying to intimidate me, because it's not working in any way whatsoever?" "Why not?" Naruto smirked. "Well, first of all, you're like, what, 12? I'm an MY mid-30s brat." Yagura roared as Naruto hit a lifelong sore point. "And even if I was a kid, it's not like you have room to talk," he pointed out while glaring accusingly at him. Naruto shrugged, conceding the point. He was only 13 after all. "So instead of being a munchkin, you're a midget. Wow, that's so much more frightening." Naruto drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm going to fucking kill you." Yagura screamed as he leapt forward, bringing his iron staff to bear down on Naruto. The crimson-clad blonde blocked the attack by crisscrossing Kanshu and Bakuya, but even then the force of the attack cracked the ground underneath him. Naruto smiled as he practically saw red in Yagura's eyes. The rouse had worked perfectly. Now it was a matter of luring the enraged Jinchuriki away from battle, like leading a bull, an extremely angry and powerful bull that could destroy entire armies perhaps, but the point still remained valid. Naruto reinforced his legs to jump back as Yagura attacked again, this time in a horizontal swipe that would have crushed his ribs against his spine if he didn't dodge. "So, he wants to start off with a Bukujutsu, weapons, battle, does he?" The battle continued as the two exchanged blow after blow, while Naruto slowly allowed himself to be pushed back, keeping in mind that his role was to lure Yagura away from the main battle. Naruto parried another bow strike with Kanshu before spinning his body to counter with Bakuya. Yagura backed away from the vertical swipe, almost effortlessly. Using the momentary space his enemy had created, Naruto also backed off, though he did so much further as he jumped back several meters. He has a much longer range with that staff of his, he thought. "You're not getting away." Yagura snarled as he drew out two collapsible Fuma shurikens from behind his back, charging them with chakra and threw them both at Naruto. Naruto, who was still in mid-flip at this point, was upside down as he watched the projectiles race towards him. Grimacing, he threw both of his twin falchions in response, adjusting his aim to account for their magnetic properties to counter the large shurikens. The spinning swords crashed Yagura's weapons, nearly cutting through them as they did so. Seeing that his opponent was now unarmed, Yagura was already going through a set of hand seals, his hands nothing more than a blur. "Suten, Suryuden no Jutsu." Water release, water dragon bullet technique. The moisture around him coalesced and formed a large dragon made of water launching itself at Naruto. Landing on his feet, Naruto saw the water dragon rushing towards him. He thrust out his hand and yelled, "Ro Aes." A massive pink seven-petal flower, both luminescent and translucent, appeared in front of Naruto, acting as a shield to the oncoming attack. The water dragon crashed into the flower-shaped shield, as the powerful attack met an equally powerful defense. However, Naruto knew that Ro Aes was one of most versatile and powerful weapons in his arsenal. The 7 petals of the shield acted as a layered defense mechanism, each one as strong as a fortress wall. Eventually, the water subsided, and Naruto looked to where he had last seen Yagura only to find him gone. Suddenly, Naruto's battle-honed instincts screamed at him to duck. Not wasting any time, he did so just barely dodging a staff swing that would have taken off his head if it had connected. Instantly, he traced his signature yin and yang swords and parried the next 2 strikes, forcing Yagura back. Naruto fought the urge to smirk as he realized what just happened. First, he used his shurikens to force me to react and effectively disarm me. Next, he used Tsuryuden no Jutsu to distract me. And then while I was blinded, he closed the gap for the kill. He must have already figured out that I'd have the advantage in a ranged battle. Heh, I suppose he isn't the Mizukage for nothing. Bleach soundtrack, guitar I end. With that thought in mind, he traced a dozen nameless swords over his head and launched them at the Mizukage. Yagura spun his staff like a windmill, creating a makeshift shield that blocked the oncoming onslaught of swords. "I'm surprised you managed to survive that attack." Yagura admitted with grudging respect. "Considering how strong you are, it's strange that I don't recognize you from any of the bingo books. Who are you?" "My name is Aozaki Naruto, son of Aozaki Mana," Naruto declared. Tone of pride in his voice would have been obvious to any other opponent, but it was lost on Yagura, whose face contorted in derision. "Aozaki?" Yagura snorted. "Do you mean that 2-bit whore who fled from this country like a whipped dog?" Naruto's gaze instantly darkened at the insult to his mother. Overwhelming killing intent that would have brought lesser ninja to their knees erupted from Naruto. "What did you say?" he snarled, his voice laced with barely restrained fury. "You heard me, boy." Yagura sneered. Dark malicious charks began seeping out of the Mizukage and wrapped themselves around him, forming a thick chakra cloak. The Sanbai's signature turtle shell and horns began growing out of Yagura's face and back. Behind him, 3 spiked shrimp-like tails also took form. Yagura entered the version 2 form of the Jinchuriki form as the Sanbai molded around his body. Naruto didn't care, however. The bastard had mocked his mother and sealed his own fate. Soon he would be nothing more than a splatter of blood against the earth. Detracing both Kanshu and Bakuya, Naruto raised his hand high above his head and whispered, 9 lives. A colossal sword manifested itself in Naruto's hand. At first glance, it seemed nothing more than a crude piece of stone shaped into a simple jagged blade with an even simpler bandaged handle. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. 9 lives was the ultimate weapon of the Greek hero Heracles, and while Naruto may have only had a rough idea who this figure may have been from structural analysis, he knew that the demigod was undoubtedly powerful. 9 lives was also his most versatile weapon in unlimited blade works, an all-purpose noble phantasm capable of adapting and changing its own appearance and function depending on the target and situation of the user. Furthermore, the sword allowed Naruto to copy the monstrous speed and strength of its former wielder. All in all, it was a devastatingly powerful weapon. A shame no one really gave Yagura the memo. The Mizukage laughed as he saw the ridiculously oversized sword that manifested within Naruto's hand and immediately regretted it. Naruto crossed the distance between them in microseconds and swung down on Yagura. He had moved so fast, Yagura barely managed to dodge the oncoming attack even in his Biju form. 9 lives smashed the earth, pulverizing a large area of the ground beneath them into pieces. "He's even stronger and faster than before," Yagura noted with some alarm as he spun around Naruto's now exposed back and slammed both his palms into it. Sangosho, coral palm. Large formations of coral grew on his back, restricting his muscles in that area. Naruto gritted his teeth in pain as he was sent flying several meters before slamming down both feet onto the ground and sliding against the dirt. He looked up just in time to see Yagura leaping towards him, ready to attack once more. Naruto refused to give him the opportunity. He drew back his axe sword horizontally in preparation to strike. 9 lives blade works. Yagura found himself facing 9 high-speed simultaneous strikes. It was a testament to his skill and experience as a ninja that he managed to avoid the first attack, but he could not avoid the rest. Naruto targeted the upper arm, collarbone, windpipe, temple, diaphragm, ribs, testicles, and thighs. If Yagura hadn't been in his Biju form, he would have been nothing but dismembered body parts by now. Even then, the attack accomplished tremendous damage to his body. The jagged edges of the blades sawed into, leaving bloody gashes and wounds into Yagura, who was now coughing up blood. Looks like the sandbai gives him extremely high defensive properties, Naruto thought. That would have taken out any normal ninja. Yagura, you're as fearsome as the rumors say. Naruto shifted his body for a moment and gasped when he felt immense pain from his back where Yagura had struck him earlier. Shit, it's like my entire back is paralyzed. What the hell was that attack? It's called Sangosho, Kit. It's a strike that grows paralyzing corals onto your back, restricting your movements. Kurama, is that you? Who else would it be, dumbass? The now identified fox asked snidely. Ignoring the jibe, Naruto asked the question that had been on his mind ever since he had fought Gaara. Kurama, why can't you ever give me cool abilities like that? I thought you were supposed to be the strongest Biju. Because shut up, the fox answered without really answering the question at all. Anyways, you should get back to your fight. The sandbai Jinchuriki is starting to get up. You son of a bitch. Yagura snarled as he struggled to his feet. I'm going to kill you. An explosion of malicious chakra sent Naruto flying back high into the air. He twisted 9 lives around and used it to shield himself from the blast, but even then, his arms strained to hold the sword against such a powerful shock wave. Landing an enormous distance away from where he was thrown, Naruto looked up to see a giant 3-tailed turtle. It resembled a much larger and detailed version of Yagura's previous Biju form. Is that the sandbai? Naruto questioned Kurama. Yeah, that's him all right. Watch out, Kit. The sandbai might not be the strongest of us Bijus, but he's definitely not the weakest. Oh, really? Naruto asked sardonically. And here I thought fighting one of the tailed beasts would be easy. Kami knows this must be my first time ever fighting one. Chi smartass. Dai Aozi. The sandbai, or Yagura, or whatever the hell that damn thing was, screamed at him. The sandbai jumped into the air and rolled itself into a ball, crashing into the ground towards Naruto. The sharp protrusions on its back made this attack akin to that of a saw blade. I believe this attack was called Shell Spear, but it was never identified in the manga. Ro-Ayas! Naruto shouted, once more calling forth the 7-petal shield to defend himself. The instant the sandbai's attack struck against his defense, it smashed through first 3 layers almost instantly. Though the attack slowed, it showed no signs of stopping as sandbai continued to roll. The 4th layer fell and the 5th followed soon after. Naruto stared in disbelief as his ultimate defense was quickly being overcome as though it made of thin ice. Rikudo Sennin's balls! Stop gawking and get the hell out of the way, Kit! Kurama screamed at him. Following Kurama's advice too late, Naruto jumped back as the sandbai smashed through the remaining layers of Ro-Ayas and bulldozed right over him. Naruto screamed in agony as the body slam pounded him into the earth, breaking several of his bones in the process. Naruto writhed in pain on the ground, coughing up large amounts of blood. Many of his ribs had been cracked or broken. The sharp spikes on the sandbai's back caused severe lacerations into his flesh. Naruto was facing major internal bleeding and organ failure. He looked up to see the fully transformed sandbai heading west to where the main battle was currently raging. A single attack with the Baijudama, tailed beast ball, could easily wreak havoc on the rebel forces and change the tide of battle. He could not let that happen. He would not let that happen. Ignoring the screaming protests of his devastated muscles, Naruto inched forwards as he crawled on the ground, desperately trying to stand up. Kurama, I could use some chakra here. The fox complied, and with tremendous effort, Naruto stood up and closed his eyes, tracing a copy of Avalon within his body. The exquisite sheath combined with the effects of Kyubai's chakra did wonders in healing his damaged body. Naruto focused his chakra into his hand as he began forming his next sword. The air around his hand pulsated a golden light as he traced a straight sword. Its blade shone silver, its cross guard virtually golden, and its handle was a royal blue. Naruto lifted his sword high into the air as the golden energy of his sword swirled around him, pulsating large amounts of chakra as he poured in as much of Kurama's chakra as he possibly could. A column of light emerged from its tip to pierce the sky. Naruto swung down the blade. shouting the name of the miracle he held in his hand as he did so. Excalibur. A golden beam of light shot out at the Biju. The sandby froze in mid-stride as he turned to his left, catching only a glimpse of the attack before it overtook him. The sandby's form completely disintegrated under the golden light, flinging Yagura's original body into the ground. In the end, the Mizukage had been taken completely off guard. Whatever defense Yagura could have had to counter the attack, he simply didn't have enough time or space to deploy it. Though Naruto may have struck the decisive blow, Yagura lost to his own complacency. Naruto wouldn't make the same mistake. Still hurt from his injuries, Naruto limped forwards into the smoking ruins of where the sandby had once stood, looking for either the Mizukage or his corpse to ensure that his opponent was dead. He found it. But what he did not expect, however, was to find Yagura's body draped over another man's shoulder. The tall man had pale blue skin, fish-like eyes, and markings that looked like gills under those eyes. As the man saw Naruto approaching, he smiled, revealing sharp shark teeth akin to those of Zabuza, Suijutsu, and Chijiro. "Hashigaki Kasame," Naruto commented, recognizing the man instantly. "Kirigakure no Kaijin, monster hidden in the mist and wielder of the infamous Samehada. What are you doing here?" It wasn't surprising that the man would be here. Kasame was one of the few remaining members of the Seven Swordsmen after all, but it was his appearance that alarmed Naruto. Instead of the standard Kirigakure flak vest and garb that most Jonins of Kiri wore, Kasame had instead chosen to wear a black cloak decorated with red clouds. His forehead protector had a long, horizontal scratch carved across the symbol his village. Naruto knew that it was a traditional method for missing nins to show they had rescinded their allegiances and rejected their villages. So what the hell was going on? Kasame's grin widened even further. Well, aren't you a smart one?" He snorted. "Go home, kid, this is grown-up business. You may have defeated Yagura, but you're way out of your mind if you think you can beat me, especially in your condition. I'd rather not have to kill an already half-dead 12-year-old. Naruto snarled as he leapt forward and swung Excalibur down on the fish-faced swordsman. Kasame smirked. "Well, I guess you're not as smart as I thought you were." He swung Samehada off of his back and brought it to bear against Excalibur, effortlessly blocking the attack, and they stood in the deadlock for several moments. To Naruto's shock, however, Excalibur began dematerializing in front of his every eyes as it reverted back to the chakra with which it was initially created. Now empty-handed, Naruto ducked as the giant bandaged cleaver passed over his head and jumped back to his original position. Standing up, Naruto glared at Kasame. "Your oversized fish stick absorbs chakra, doesn't it?" he asked flatly, already knowing the answer. "Yep," Kasame answered. "You figured that out pretty quickly. If I didn't know any better, I'd say your swords there were made of chakra." Naruto didn't answer, turning Kasame's smirk downright feral. "You're fucked." Kasame moved in a blur, crossing the gap between them in an instant. Naruto dodged to the left, but Kasame proved his skill with the sword and shifted his grip at the very last second, swinging the Samehada directly at Naruto. The sword cleaved large chunks of flesh right off of Naruto, tearing through his skin like butter. "My Samehada doesn't cut," Kasame told the blonde, who was now convulsing on the ground in pain. "It shaves you to ribbons." He lifted his cleaver off of his shoulder and raised it up into the air for a final strike. "This is the end, brat. You brought this upon yourself." Amaterasu. Kasame jumped back as black flames separated him from Naruto. In less than an instant, Itachi, standing in all his glory wearing his standard ANBU uniform, landed in front of Naruto, putting himself in between the two. "Well, if it isn't the Konoha no Karasu, Crow of Konoha, Uchiha Itachi," Kasame commented with amusement. "Looks like I get to meet a lot of interesting people today." "Hashigaki Kasame," Itachi returned pointedly. "You will not lay a hand on this boy. The rebels have won and they will soon be arriving. I suggest you leave while you still can." In any other circumstances, Itachi would have taken his chances and fought the swordsmen of the mist. However, his main priority right now was getting Naruto to the nearest medic. Naruto was suffering from severe wounds and injuries, so it would only be a small matter of time before he finally died of blood loss. Fighting Kasame now would only waste their already limited amount of time and place Naruto in further danger. Kasame shrugged nonchalantly. "Whatever. I already have what I came here for anyways." Hefting Yagura over his shoulder, he walked off, disappearing into the mist. Naruto visibly relaxed and gave his surrogate older brother a weak smile. "Itachi Nick-san, just in case I don't have a chance to say this later, thanks." He closed his eyes, exhaustion washing over him as he fell into a deep sleep. Now that he thought about it, it had been quite a few days since he had last slept. Minato sat in the waiting room of the hospital outside of the recovery room, where Naruto was still unconscious, healing from his wounds. By the time Itachi had brought Naruto to the nearest medical station, he barely enough blood to sustain a kitten. It was a miracle he managed to survive it at all. Right now in his hand, Minato held the memory crystal that Naruto had thrown at him the day before. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't bring himself to stop looking through its contents over and over again. When he first watched it, he wondered just why Naruto was so willing to let him see such an intimate moment of his life. To guilt him. No, he understood now. It was to show them how a real parent was supposed to act towards their child. It had its intended effects. Neither he nor his wife had the gall anymore to call themselves parents in front of Naruto, not when there was already someone else he acknowledged to fulfill that role, someone who loved him to the point where they would give their lives for him without hesitation. I can't believe it took all this for me to finally realize how badly I screwed up. Minato thought bitterly. He thought back to the time when he first found out he would have twins. A boy and a girl, eh? Heh, I bet Hitomi will be just as beautiful as her mother. And Naruto will be a ladies' man just like his old man. He had bragged. The comment had earned him a smack to the side of his head from Kushina, to the time he sealed the Kyuubi into his own children. Hitomi, Naruto, you two are the heroes of this village. He had told them as he held them fondly in his arms, to the time of the council. Minato had slammed his hand into the table so hard it cracked. Hitomi will not be a weapon and Naruto will not be executed. He roared, glaring at Danzo, over my cold, dead body. When, he asked himself sadly, when did I forget what it meant to be a father? He sighed sadly. I took the mantle of Hokage to change this village for the better. Instead, I let it change me for the worst. What have I turned into these past 13 years? That night, Naruto dreamed once more. The Red Knight accepted his death, just the way he had accepted what he believed would his death all those years ago during the hellish fire of his hometown. He found himself in a field of blades and he saw someone, a girl with dark, long twin tails. Her name was Rin if Naruto recalled correctly, but the Red Knight called something else. He called her the world. He called her Alea. Alea offered him an opportunity to become something called a counter-guardian. The Red Knight was ecstatic, to continue fulfilling his ideals even after death, to continue being a hero and saving others. It was something he had desired. He accepts this offer without a moment's hesitation, but it was a lie. To be a counter-guardian wasn't to be a hero. It was to be a killer, a cleaner that exterminated the thousands that had to be sacrificed for the continued survival of humanity. He was surrounded by so much blood, so much death, it made him sick. Again and again the Red Knight killed, trying to tell himself, deluding himself that someday somehow the world would become the ideal he had wished for. But an eternity passed and his ideal remained only just that, an ideal. He saw it over and over, meaningless massacres, meaningless suffering, meaningless happiness. He was forced to watch it all. Even when he refused to look, it surrounded him. That isn't what he wished for. He didn't become a guardian for this. Naruto jerked awake from his nightmare, his heart beating completely out of control. He checked his surroundings to find himself in a hospital bed, most likely somewhere inside a hospital. His wounds had been cleaned and bandaged. His ripped and ragged clothes were gone, instead replaced by a hospital gown. Belatedly, he looked to his left to see a mop of red hair resting against his sheets. It looked like Kushina had fallen asleep by his bed. Tear stains were still visible on the white fabric by her face. Naruto sighed, resting his head against both his hands. Why was he having these dreams now? Those dreams were supposed to have ended years ago when the Red Knight had died. Those dreams seemed so real. He could feel the emotions, the perceptions, the very pain the Red Knight experienced. Sometimes he had trouble distinguishing them from his own perceptions. There were often times when he wondered if maybe his perceived life was actually the dream, while his dreams of the Red Knight were actually reality. This particular dream disturbed him the most. The Red Knight had fought endlessly for a utopia, yet even after fighting for over an eternity, he never found it. Naruto took a moment to think about what that meant for his own path. If his ideals couldn't be reached, if his path led only to the deaths and pain of others, then what was he really fighting for? Why was he fighting so hard? He spent several moments in silence dwelling on that question. After a while, he leaned back and sighed in sorrowed resignation. He fought for those ideals because they were Mana's ideals. He fought for them because he admired the Red Knight and his mother for following that path. Emiya at least believed passionately for what he was fighting for, even if he did borrow those ideals from his father. Naruto knew that he only fought for them for no other reason than because his mother fought for them. Naruto laughed bitterly. Emiya, you weren't the biggest fake, I am. The sound stirred Kushina awake from her sleep. Naruto, she muttered, blinking at him sleepily. She looked up, dazed and disoriented as she looked around before spotting Naruto, her eyes widening. Naruto. With that cry, she launched herself at the blonde, wrapping him up in an embrace. Naruto sighed tiredly as he felt himself smothered by the blubbering red head. Kushina, get off of me. He really wasn't in the mood to argue. Kushina flinched at the tone and backed off of him immediately, looking slightly abashed. Before he could ask any questions, the door behind her creaked open and Minato popped his head in to see what the commotion was about. Seeing Naruto conscious, he smiled. Ah, good you're awake. You've been out for 3 days. I'm glad to see you're all right. Naruto didn't bother deigning that a response as he glared flatly at the older blonde. Minato's smile faltered before his expression turned serious. Naruto, we need to talk. I thought I already made it clear we have nothing to talk about, Namikaze-sama. Naruto told him with dead finality. Naruto, please, this is serious. Minato told him. Itachi told me you fought Hoshigaki Kasame. Naruto smiled sardonically. You mean the guy that rendered my primary jutsu completely useless and nearly cleaved me in half? Yeah, he kinda left an impression on me. Is it true he wore a dark cloak with red clouds on it? The yondaime asked, ignoring the sarcasm. Yes, but why does it matter to you? Naruto asked, raising a brow, because it means he was a member of Akatsuki. A voice to his right answered. Naruto turned around to see Jiraiya climbing in through the hospital window. The Toad Sannin looked uncharacteristically serious as he held Naruto's gaze. They're an organization that's currently after Jinchuriki. To be more precise, they're after the Bijus inside the Jinchuriki. He told him, answering the unasked question. If that's true, then why didn't he take me when he had the chance? Naruto asked skeptically. Probably because he didn't know you had the Kyuubi. Jiraiya answered him. Hitomi was the only person who was revealed to have the Kyuubi's chakra sealed within her. You were announced to only have the soul. Naruto's expression darkened. Are you telling me the only reason I'm still alive right now is because that bastard didn't realize I was a Jinchuriki? More or less, Jiraiya answered, nodding. Naruto, I beg you to come back home to Konoha. Minato pleaded with him. You don't even have to be a ninja, just let us protect you. Not even you can hope to fight against a group of S-class missing nins. Namikaze, you're laboring under the assumption that I hold any value in my life at all, Naruto informed him flatly. An assumption that is completely wrong in this case. I'm not afraid of facing this organization, and if they ever do manage to capture me, he shrugged casually. I could kill myself in less than an instant and take both me and Kurama before they even come close to extracting him. How, Kushina asked sadly, how can you say something like that? When life holds so little for a man, what reason does he have to fear from death? Naruto asked rhetorically. I refuse to be your weapon and I refuse to be your prisoner. Even if it means I won't live very long, at least I would live free and by my principles. He got up from his hospital bed despite his injuries, ignoring Kushina's protest. He slipped off the hospital robe and traced a new set of clothes around his body. His red cloak was a miniaturized version of the Red Knight's own coat, altered from the Shroud of Martin. His black cargo pants were made of a special artificial material that could be reinforced to be stronger than steel. A white dress shirt lay under the overcoat, since the Red Knight's usual plate was reserved for only battle purposes. After having been subjected to 2 life-shattering revelations, he walked out of them with only one dominant thought in his mind. I need a drink. As it turned out, it wasn't very difficult to find a drink in the mass orgy of celebrations and excitement of the rebel victory. Zabuza had found him immediately and dragged him to a large square table that had been filled to the edge with bottles of brandy. Ao, Chijuro, Haku had been there too. Apparently Suichitsu was still in the hospital recovering from his wounds, while Mei was busy trying to restore administration under the new regime of Kirigakure. Naruto wasn't sure how it started, but somehow Zabuza and Ao got it into their heads to start a drinking contest between the 5 of them. Haku opted out of the competition, refusing to drink a sip of alcohol, while Chijuro had been coaxed into drinking by Ao, who had insisted that all real men drank alcohol. Unsurprisingly then, he was the first to drop out of the competition. Ao lasted much better, passing out after his 80th bottle. Naruto, however, partially due to his Uzumaki metabolism and partially due to the Kyubai's healing properties, had matched Zabuza drink for drink and was now on his 25th bottle while still only tipsy. Haku sighed as he watched his master destroy his poor liver with the substance he had practically inhaled the past hour. Zabuza-sama, please stop. You're clearly going to hurt your health. Hagu I refushed to loose to his kiz. Zabuza shouted, a drunken slur covering his accent as he stood up and pointed accusingly at the offender. He would have also slammed a fist down onto the table except his complete loss of motor control caused him to miss the table entirely. It should be noted that by this point, Zabuza was completely wasted. Zabuza-sama, Chodriwo-san passed out after his first drink. Haku informed him flatly. Oh, I refushed to loose to his kiz. He shouted once more, adjusting his aim. Zabuza-sama, that's an empty bar stool. Oh, you sure, Hagu, thee look so alike. Zabuza commented in befuddlement. Haku sighed in exasperation. Zabuza-sama, just take your last drink already. He did so, grabbing the nearest bottle of brandy and chugging down his throat in a single go. Slamming the empty bottle back down onto the table, Zabuza wobbled in his seat for a moment and the hiccuped. He groaned, leaning back into his chair, and then completely toppled over onto the ground, completely unconscious. Zabuza-sama. Naruto looked around the table at his unconscious and defeated foes as he leaned back against his chair and smirked, sipping another shot of brandy. I am the champion of everything, he thought to himself, feeling more victorious now than when he beat Yagura or killed Gato. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share, and do comments.